It's 900 hours Central Africa time on this Thursday, the 21st of January 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News Channel 404. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the first hour. I'm Elvis Preston and we will be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on your YouTube channel. Now today we're asking you a very important question that's happening on our continent. We're asking you this morning. If you look on our screen, the question is there. What can we expect from the UN's envoy's visit to Burundi this morning? As you know, the United Nations Security Envoy is there this morning and for 2 days, and they'll be trying to convince the government to accept some of the talks that's currently happening. So that's the question to you. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. The World Economic Forum's annual meeting continues today amid a plunge in global markets. The Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago, says that he's concerned about the impact of the weakening rand on inflation. And the Higher Education Ministry and universities have called on students to end violent and disruptive fees must fall protests. Now those are all your headlines. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. A very interesting morning. It seems like the tennis match fixing scandal is getting bigger and bigger as we go along. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in sports today.
What it is to say. I mean, I've lost that match. I mean, I don't know what you're trying, if you're trying to create a story about that match or for that matter any.
World number one and defending men's champion Novak Djokovic stepped off court after cruising to the third round to defend his integrity as he gets accused of throwing a match in 2007.
Points.
Game set. Back on the court, and Andy Murray was in a hurry this morning as he imperiously dispatched Australian Sam Groth in just 90 minutes.
And a brilliant display of high quality returning.
And it's last chance saloon for the once mighty Proteas test side as they scramble to regain some sort of respectability after being humiliated by the touring English. That's that and more we've got for you in the sports. Be sure to stick around for that at about 10:20 or so. But back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's start off with your top story this morning. The World Economic Forum's annual meeting continues today amid a plunge in global markets. Stocks in Asia, Europe and the United States closed sharply lower yesterday. New figures show that the Chinese economy grew at its slowest rate in a quarter of a century in 2015, and the dramatic slump in the price of oil is also a major factor in the market mayhem. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has arrived in Davos, where he says South Africa will present a very strong case for investment despite the difficult economic climate.
The cold weather has the South African delegation all fired up and ready to make its case for investing in the country. As the world enters what it's dubbed the fourth revolution, Africa stands ready to embrace the challenge.
If the fourth revolution is coming, is Africa still going to remain behind it as it remained in other revolutions, industrial revolutions in the past? And we are saying, therefore, the issues relating to Africa should feature very highly from the delegation from Africa.
But what about the uncertainty and sometimes mixed messages?
We are going to deal with it, and I think there is a warm feeling towards South Africa here, and I'm sure we are going to be able to convey the message that whatever challenges that are there, we are going to deal with.
For Team SA, it's now hands on deck. It's clear that spirits are high and there's much anticipation from South Africa's camp. And they know that time to match words with action is now. Mzwandile Mbethe, SABC News, Davos, Switzerland.
The Higher Education Ministry and universities have called on students to end violent and disruptive fees must fall protest. Minister Bladen Zamanda and Vice-Chancellors met in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg yesterday. Now, they revealed that universities affected by the protest have suffered damages worth more than 150 million rand.
Another roundtable meeting to diffuse tensions on campuses and tackle the funding crisis. But massive damages at institutions countrywide as 2015 drew to a close a sore point. Arson responsible for most of the damage.
We can't afford more damage to institutional assets. Our preliminary damage report suggests an estimated 150 million rands of damage to public property last year.
Universities are set on avoiding a repeat and also want to protect staff and students.
The only reason those private security have been brought on is because registration was being prevented.
The National Student Financial Aid Scheme has scheduled a briefing on the 2016 budget allocations and additional funding.
For this year, 2016, the criteria that NSFAS applies is going to remain as it is. The new model, however, is not addressing just the funding issues for the missing middle. It's addressing the funding issues for poor students and missing middle.
A new funding model is expected to be rolled out from next year. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News, Kempton Park.
Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says that he's concerned about the impact of the weakening rand on inflation. However, he's optimistic that the exchange rate will eventually adjust to fundamentals. Kganyago says the bank is facing a policy dilemma of slow economic growth and rising inflation ahead of a decision on interest rates next week. Most economists expect an increase on January the 28th as a sharply weaker rand and rising food prices fuel inflation. Kganyago says that since the last rates decision, the inflation outlook has deteriorated. The rand depreciated at about 25% against the dollar in 2015. The African Union has been very forward-leaning in pointing to the challenges in Burundi and the problem of instability in that country. Now, this led to the AU to take a decision of sending in troops to Burundi. Lahana Tsotsetsi spoke to Yaki Sillier from the Institute of Security Studies on the situation in Burundi relating to the deployment of the AU Peace Force.
For the first time, the African Union, in terms of Article 4 of the PSC protocol, has said that we invoke the right of the Assembly to take a decision to send a peacekeeping force to Burundi to try and deal with issues of gross human rights violations and to avoid instability. The government of Burundi has said no. We will consider these to be invading forces. But the government of Burundi, by having signed the Constitutive Act of the African Union and its PSC protocol, has in actual fact agreed technically to allow this also to happen to itself. But it's going to be a long haul to see that the African Union sends in troops without the agreement of Burundi itself. So I expect that we will see quite a bit of diplomacy and efforts and maybe a decision by the Assembly and then the East Africa region to try and engage and force an acceptance by Burundi. Because what Burundi has done is they've thrown the Arusha Agreement out of the window. And many leaders, Tanzania, Uganda and others in the region, are saying that this is an agreement that was developed over many years, and you have to stick to this. It's not just a third-term issue by Pierre Nkurunziza. It is an issue of there's a peace agreement that we all signed off and that Burundi has to implement. It's a tough challenge, but I think that the pressure on Burundi is mounting, and at some point I think all this pressure will come to a head. Burundi presents the African Union with a different level of challenge to ever before. Never before has the African Union said, we will intervene in the internal affairs of a sovereign, independent country because we think the internal developments present a challenge to itself and the region.
The United Nations Security Council envoys is expected in Burundi in the capital Bujumbura today for 2 days of meetings with the opposition, civil society and with the President Pierre Nkurunziza. The UN envoy will pressurize government to agree to talks with the opposition under a new mediator. The 15 council ambassadors will be making their second trip to Burundi in less than a year, hoping to avert what some fear could be a return to all-out war. Burundi descended into bloodshed in April when the President Nkurunziza announced his intention to run for a controversial third term, which he went on to win in July. Now, for the latest on the situation in Burundi, we are now joined live from our Pretoria studio by the Burundian ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Isai Ntiri Zoshira. Ambassador, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning.
First and foremost, Ambassador, how would you describe the current situation in Burundi as we speak?
Yeah, we can say that the current situation in Burundi is a little bit insecure because we observe that we have some insecurity on the ground, mainly in some small parts of the capital city of Bujumbura. But we can say that the situation is under control because 99% of the territory is really at peace. So only a very, very little areas in Bujumbura are unstable, and the situation is under control.
But some are suggesting, including the UN, that that the country is unstable because they're sending in a force. What's your reaction to that?
We understand that they are really concerned about the situation in Burundi, and the problem is that there are so many wrong information which has been spread out by the radical opposition, and even some Western countries which are, let's say, serving the opinion some wrong information and deliberately forcing the information. And the biggest lie which is served to the opinion is in saying that the origin of this unrest is the so-called third term of President Nkurunziza. But if really this so-called third term of President Nkurunziza was the real problem, the same country would have the same sort of allergic reaction when in situations where the third term is at stake. We have observed that in neighboring countries, constitutions have been changed and allowing the incumbent president to run for fourth terms. But those countries did say nothing. They said quiet, as if for those countries a third term, a fourth term, a fifth term is normal. So this is one of the biggest lies people are being served, and we think it's time to say the truth to the international community.
And what is that truth, Ambassador? What is that truth? Because the third term was said to be the problem.
No, it is not a problem because, as you see, this country did not have the same reaction when some countries changed their constitution to allow presidents to run for a third term. So the real problem is that really saying the truth is that some countries do not want the CNDD, FDD to run the country. And because they do not control it, and they would like to put some personalities they are controlling and have in Burundi a government they are controlling, what is not the case now.
Now, here's a story. The United Nations says that it has evidence of gang rape, torture and extrajudicial killings by security forces in Burundi. What's your reaction to that?
I think now the Security Council is in Bujumbura, and they will have engagement with the government, and or the truth will be, let's say, known.
Now, you did mention that the third term is not a problem, and violence in Burundi seems to have escalated after President Pierre Nkurunziza said that he would run for that third term, which he did, and he won. Would you now say that the situation was peaceful before the third term announcement?
In fact, the problems, because the problem not being this third term, this problem started even before. The insecurity was say, let's observe even before. So the origin of this unrest is not really the third term, because it started a long time ago. Because in 2010, there were elections, and the international community said the elections were free and fair, but the losers of these elections said there have been massive riggings, so that they refused the result of the election. Since that time, they had been preparing for this, let's say, to disrupt these elections so that no elections can be held. And that's why this unrest has been, let's say, observed. It's because there are some opposition, radical opposition parties who are supported by these some Western countries to come in power through undemocratic ways, because they know the CNDD-FDD being a very strong party, very popular party, it is impossible to remove it from power through democratic elections. That's why they are resorting to this, let's say, undemocratic ways.
Now, Ambassador, there have been also warnings that genocide in Burundi is either imminent or it's already in full swing. Now, you indicated earlier there's only a small part of the capital city where there's unrest. Would you seek to clarify that for us in terms of the imminent genocide that might take place in Burundi?
Since the beginning, we have been saying that there is no genocide possible in Burundi. First of all, we have the political institutions which are shared by the Hutus and the Tutsis in the proportions of 60% of Hutu and 40% for Tutsis. That is in, let's say, political institutions such as parliament, government, and so on. Then, in the security forces, defense and security forces, we have 50% of Hutu, 50% of Tutsi. So how can it be possible that in a so arranged situation where all the tribe or the, let's say, ethnic groups are sharing responsibility and power in the institutions, how come a genocide can be organized? It is impossible for a genocide to occur in Burundi now, given this situation where all the ethnic groups are working together in all institutions and defense forces.
We now have several countries, including the European Union, US, imposing sanctions on your country, and the United Nations Security Council envoys is now there today. They expected in the capital Bujumbura today for 2 days. What do you expect from this particular meeting and visit there?
You know, the government of Burundi has been engaging with all these partners since a long time, and it will continue engaging with them. And we hope that this let's say, visit of the UN Security Council to Bujumbura will allow all the parties to really get insight to the real solution of the problem and find, let's say, a common ground so that peace can come back in Burundi. That's the wish of the government of Burundi. That's the wish of the population of Burundi.
And just briefly, what in your view then would be the political situation in Burundi?
The political situation will evolve in a way that all the parties will be, let's say, happy of the conclusion of this situation.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time, and let's hope that everything works out well in Burundi. Now, that's our discussion point today. That was the Burundian ambassador to South Africa, Isai Interozishira, giving us an update about the situation in his country. We continue with that discussion today, and there's a question that we also posed to you today on the situation in Burundi, part and parcel of this wonderful continent that we have, and we're asking you, what do you expect from the UN envoy's visit to Burundi today? Do you think it will be fruitful? Well, we'll explore that even more with our next guest to look at the impact of Burundi's worsening situation it has on its neighboring countries such as Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is, by the way, the Great Lakes region. Already thousands of Burundians are reported to have fled to Tanzania since the break of violence in the politically troubled country. We're now joined by Issa Komo, an African analyst. Mr. Komo, very good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming through.
Morning, and thanks for inviting me.
First and foremost, the United Nations and the rest of the international community have now been criticized for standing on the sidelines and has done nothing, they say, about the situation in Burundi. How do you think this visit by the UN's envoy to Burundi will perhaps solve the issues that Burundi does currently have?
Well, I think the UN and other international organizations like the AU have got to be involved in Burundi. But they should not go there with a predetermined view on Burundi or who the culprit is. As it appears now that they've actually identified the individual who's responsible, the Nkurunziza, and they're actually talking about genocide, which is imminent, as they say. They also talk about the extrajudicial killings. And again, they're actually talking about the possibility of actually taking those responsible to the ICC. Now, that does not bode well. Now, it actually sort of points to a thing of not you're just trying to look for peace, but you're trying to enforce peace. Now, that's the type of solution that we're getting in Africa. And we can get to something which is out of Burundi. If you look at the Sudan question, the two sides that were actually negotiating. Those negotiations got to an impasse, but before the negotiations could go on, the Americans just gave them an ultimatum, and said that you either sign or we do ABC. And people signed. And I think that is the new form of solution forming in Africa, which basically is very sad.
Now, this deal that the UN wants Nkurunziza to sign to allow the UN troops, if that deal is not signed, what can we expect to happen next?
That's the AU deal. First of all, that deal basically, as I say, that is unprecedented. And it's actually very untidy, as far as I'm concerned. It is very untidy that people don't say it. I mean to say that when you actually send in a force, a peacekeeping force, you've actually got to, they've got to have a mandate and they've got to have a deployment strategy. How are they going to get in there? You know, the UN learned a lesson when they sent troops, American troops to Somalia, where there was no ceasefire, where there was no barracking of the opposing forces. And also the mandate was unclear. Was it under Chapter 6 or under Chapter 7? So what happened is that the American forces actually bore the brunt. Now, in Burundi, with the AU forces, how are they going to go there? Are they going to go there as peacekeepers? Are they going to go there as observers? Are they going to go there as peace enforcers? And at the containment, who are they going to... When you take a force of about a whole brigade of 5,000 troops, that's about a brigade and a half. What about the sovereignty of the country? What about the armed forces of Burundi? Are you going to force them in the barracks? Are you going to force them on gunpoint? Are you going to dictate to them what they do and take over their role? But then, okay, there's the opposition. Who is the opposition? What's going to happen to them? Are you going to also, there'll be cantonment of them? Are you going to put them in the barracks? And they're unknown. And basically, the whole thing is untidy because fingers are pointed at the Burundi government. Yet the people who, what's happening now, there was a very, you could say peaceful, but very vocal demonstration. But that has been infiltrated by armed groups, people throwing grenades at the police, people arming them, attacking military barracks. Who is arming them? It's been said these people have been trained in Burundi. The boys who have been captured, they said, well, we were there, we come from Burundi, and we went to the Burundi army and they armed us. No, not Burundi, sorry, the Rwandan government. But now, who's actually looking at that? Is there anything UN statement saying that Rwanda, keep out of that, don't escalate the thing? So you find that, as the ambassador says, he's actually right. There is a conspiracy to destabilize the country, to let it get to a point whereby it is the government is shown to be a failed state. And then from there, everything goes. In fact, there is a plan to actually destroy the government of Nkurunziza, but that's within the regional politics of the thing. I think it's outside our discussion.
So this is all a conspiracy, you think?
There is an element of conspiracy from Rwanda. That's 100%. That you cannot take it out. That is a conspiracy of Rwanda's hand in the whole thing. It's actually there. Who are arming the demonstrators? It's the demonstrators. Now they're being armed.
So this has got nothing to do with internal conflict within Burundi, you would suggest?
Internal conflict Burundi, it was never solved. It was always been there. It's historical. And people are actually talking big about the Arusha Agreement. It was fantastic. As far as I'm concerned, is that the Arusha Agreement, I was following it from the time when I was in Tanzania. The Arusha Agreement was fantastic in the sense that this was the first time these two groups were actually put together to actually talk. It will be remembered that before the Arusha Agreement, when Buyoya took over power, the Great Lakes countries sat together and they imposed sanctions on Burundi. But those sanctions failed because two countries which agreed to impose those sanctions, which was Uganda and Rwanda, actually went and they sort of broke the sanctions. So that failed. So now it was that we come and sit. Now that was a very positive move. But then you find that with the Hutu delegates to that meeting, they said that they had quite a number of Hutu groups, but they were coming from a situation of about 20 to 30 years of military rule, of one power state rule. Now, were those people really political parties which are representing a group? They never existed as a political party. So basically, they were actually elites, representing their elite thing. Now, a group which had actually been formed, which had some mass base, it was the CNDD, FDD, but it was the forces. They were actually fighting. They were not invited. The big thing about the Arusha peace talks was that those groups which were fighting were not invited. That was the CNDD and the FNL of Agathon Rwasa. With the Sun City talks of the DRC, all groups were invited. A ceasefire was put in place. Now, with such a meeting, see, that's why it is faltered.
Now, the threat. What threat does the Burundi instability pose to the whole of the East African community if nothing is done in this particular case, you think?
Well, the whole thing is this, that fighting could break up, but I mean to say the fighting, it will not be sort of fighting genocidal, as the ambassador said. I mean, with the Arusha talks, the Tutsis are just 20% at the most. They're about 18, some even say 15, but they've got a 50% representation in the army. So see that the genocide cannot happen. They're overrepresented in the army, overrepresented in parliament, overrepresented in government. So basically, within the country, there's no genocide that can take place. But the politics is regional, in the sense that there are countries which are fighting for regional hegemony. I mean, I don't think that I would be able to talk about which countries they are, but they are known. It's not only Burundi that's been destabilized, it's the DRC that's been destabilized. There is a conspiracy. That's a clear conspiracy. Now, people should go back and see the forces which are destabilizing the DRC is the same forces which are destabilizing the Burundi.
So it's the same forces that are destabilizing the entire Great Lake region?
Yes, they want to, it's a hegemony. It's a hegemonic thing that they want to actually have. And that's the thing which actually took place at the Sun City talks. With the Sun City talks, when they agreed to go to a political process, it was that all the fighting forces that would containment of those forces, taking them to barracks, and then from there they would be drafted into the new army. But those forces, when they lost the elections, we only got 1%, they refused to unite the forces with the national forces, and they became a separate force. Now it's the same people, the same process that is being actually started in Burundi.
Mr. Komo, as usual, thank you so much for enlightening us on the situation in Burundi.
Thank you for having me.
That was Issa Komo, an African analyst on the situation in Burundi. We continue with that discussion and your comments. Let's take a look at that. Now, UN Security Council ambassadors are expected to visit Burundi to push the government to open up serious talks with the opposition and to agree to an African Union force that could prevent a slide to all-out war. Let's now take a look at some of your tweets. Remember that you can send your tweets to Twitter at SABC Newsroom here, and we'll read them for you as we continue. Let's take a look at Xavier Bonfield. He says, another sleepless night for Kanyosha and Musaha residents. May God squeeze you in his almighty hand tonight. Hashtag the Burundi crisis. As you know, it is a crisis, and we continue with that discussion today. Quizera says, the ambassador, at Ambassador Power, hashtag Burundi crisis, react soon. Tomorrow could be too late. This one from Steve says, according to William Nyatmwe, some women in Burundi are using rape as a weapon against the government. What a shameful and indecent statement. Hashtag Burundi crisis. That one from Steve there. This country is seriously in ruins, and it is heartbreaking to see, says CN on the Twitter page. Now, you can do the same. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. We'll read them as we continue. You can also do so on our Facebook page. Let's now take a look at some of the front pages in the newspapers from around the globe. And we're starting off in New York. The New York International reports that American warplanes have struck 9 depots where the Islamic State is believed to have stashed tens of millions of dollars in cash. Now to Europe now. The Times says that the European Union is on the brink of a catastrophe The German Vice-Chancellor warned after Austria broke ranks to curb the number of refugees that it will allow to claim asylum. It says their 15 billion slide raises fears of market meltdown as well on the front page. And finally, in China, the South China Morning Post reports that nearly 300 Chinese cities failed to meet national standards of air quality last year. Are you surprised? Greenpeace said that on Wednesday, despite the marginal improvements in some of the worst hit areas. That's the newspapers around the globe for you here this morning. Now let's take a look now what is happening around the country here in South Africa. We start off in Durban, where the man who impersonated Maskandi star Mgimweni Kukalo is being sentenced in the Pietermaritzburg Magistrates Court today in the High Court there. And in Mpumalanga, a 35-year-old man is expected to appear in the Piet Retief Magistrates Court on 2 charges of murder. Now, he allegedly attacked an elderly couple at their farm in Dirkiesdorp. And then moving further afield in Uganda, the International Criminal Court will start deliberations today on whether there's enough evidence to put a former commander of the Lord Resistance Army on trial. Dominic Ongwen is facing 67 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes in northern Uganda between 2002 and 2005. Well, we'll take a break right now, but we will be right back after that.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sports action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
We continue with our discussion on Burundi this morning. Remember, we're also asking you a very important question. We'd like you to engage with us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. We ask you, what do you think we can expect from the UN envoy to Burundi today? They're there for 2 days. We'll find out more about that. Now, the United Nations Security Council is expected to visit Burundi today to try to convince the government to agree to peace talks. The African Union has also given a go-ahead to send peacekeeping troops to Burundi. However, the President, Pierre Nkurunziza, has rejected those efforts and says that the country does not need the peacekeepers. Joining us now in our studio is the Wits Senior Lecturer in International Relations, Professor Malte Brozic. He is here in studio with us. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for
First and foremostly, Professor, how important are these talks today, in fact for 2 days, the peace talks in Burundi, to solve the current violence in that country?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we haven't really seen proper peace talks, right? The government in Burundi is actually trying to block them, not agreeing to timelines, and then sitting with opposition and other groups. So I think at the moment it's important to have a structured approach and really kickstart proper peace talks. As you know, the Ugandan efforts unfortunately failed. So this visit of the Security Council members is quite important. It's a good chance to get on the ground and get involved again.
But it's not the first time that the group is there. Do you think they'll get anything out of Nkurunziza this time, or the opposition?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's the second visit. It's the second visit, but so far we haven't really seen a UN Security Council resolution, which is stronger. And I think in the background you can see that, for instance, the American ambassador is saying that we should actually push forward and try to get some kind of peacekeeping force on the ground. So the stakes are, this time, they are actually higher.
Always lots of talk about African solutions for Africans, and in this particular case, Burundi. Can they find their own solutions without the AU or even the UN for that matter, or is that an impossibility?
Yeah, I think that if you only bet on the government, you only get a government solution, right? So if you're looking for a solution that is inclusive, that is impartial, then of course international organizations can play a very important role. Again, unfortunately, the efforts by the African Union have not paid off. And the UN is also, both organizations are somehow getting a little bit lost over Burundi. So now it's really the time to get the momentum back and, have proper talks. But it's very early to make
Explain the two different roles between the African Union and the UN in terms of Burundi. What are their roles? Or, as you said, there might be some confusion as to what is happening.
Obviously, Burundi is a member of the African Union, and the African Union, was one of the first organizations, and as well as the regional organizations in the area to take action, and that's certainly something very good. But what was not so productive at the moment was actually the interaction between the UN and the African Union. So at the moment, the UN, there's no UN Security Council resolution actually endorsing the African Union's decision to send in peacekeepers, actually. So we are still missing this. And again, the visit at the moment of the Security Council members, and they will also travel to Addis Ababa later on, is also an opportunity for the international community to coordinate themselves much better.
How important are the attempts by the neighboring states, the African countries there, to have the mediation talks without the UN being involved? Because you have mentioned Uganda's talks, or led by the Uganda, by ECOWAS, did fail.
It's a tricky question. I think for the conflict to be solved, it will be difficult on the one hand not to involve neighboring countries. On the other hand, we know from other conflicts that sometimes neighboring countries can also contribute to the conflict. So it's a question of getting the balance right. So at the moment, it's still a lower or middle level conflict, but it can spread into the region as well. So this is what's actually at stake, and therefore again we need the organizations to get the balance right.
Now, earlier we had the Burundi ambassador chatting to us, and he says the problem is not the third term of Nkurunziza. There's other issues at stake here. Do you think that the violence in Burundi is solely because of the third term?
Let's put it that way. I think the major trigger event was really a political question, and that was about the third term. And we can see, you can see it was correlated in terms of the violence, how it spread, and so on and so forth. But violence can feed violence. And conflicts can also transform. And I think Burundi is in a stage where the original trigger event might become less important, and other issues may become more important, like an ethnic dimension, like the internal divisions within the security forces, for example, or maybe a regionalization of the conflict through neighboring countries. So, we are in between.
It's a 2-day visit by the United Nations Security Council to Burundi. Do you think that they will be able to convince the President Pierre Nkurunziza that they are needed to make sure that there's stability in Burundi?
I think sometimes the discourse on, it's either military intervention or it's nothing is wrong. Right, peacekeeping can also take different forms, and I think the UN Security Council at the moment is discussing issues of, let's say, a deployment of a political mission or police forces. I think they might be more acceptable on the ground, and we will see and look how the Security Council then proceeds with this.
We also heard about possible conspiracy theories here, but does the UN have the right to, though, intervene in Burundi without the consent of the government if they do not get it from Pierre Nkurunziza?
Yeah, first of all, I'm personally not a big fan of conspiracy theories, but there are certainly partisan interests going on within the country and in the region and so on. However, I think, of course, any use of force needs to be legitimized by a United Nations mandate. And but I think the major question here is do we get such a mandate? And there are also divisions within the Security Council at the UN, but there are also divisions within the African Union. So we don't really see these bigger majorities coming at the moment.
Professor, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. Now, that was Wits Senior Lecturer in International Relations, Professor Malte Brogic, in studio with us. We continue that discussion with you. Remember that you can engage with us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. You can also do so on our Facebook page, and we're asking you, what do you think might come out of the United Nations Security Council meeting today in that visit to Burundi? What will come out of that? Do you expect any miracles? Let us know what's on your mind. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe's Constitutional Court has delivered a landmark ruling outlawing all forms of child marriage. And let's take a look at what you have to say on our Twitter page. Remember to send it to our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. This one here from, let me see here, from Vin with her Hillary says, Zimbabwe's Constitutional Court outlaws child marriage. I don't know if that is a question or not, but that is, I'm with her. Sandra Stork says, thank you, court, at #Zimbabwe. No more child marriages. Very happy, Sandra Stork there. And this one from Ikote Brian says, Zimbabwe has passed a law legalizing marriage at the age of 18 years. #Mugabe admin. And let's see if there's another one. Well, it doesn't seem like there's more. We'll come back to some of your comments on our question that we posed to you today. That question, once again, what do we expect from the envoy, the UN envoy, United Nations Security Envoy, which is currently in Burundi? What do you expect from that? Do you expect fireworks? Do you expect miracles? Do you expect maybe Nkurunziza not to agree? Well, we'll wait for you to tell us more on the Facebook page and on the Twitter page. Now, let's take a look at what's happening on Facebook, by the way, talking about that. The South African Reserve Bank governor said yesterday the bank was facing a policy dilemma of slow growth and rising inflation ahead of a decision on interest rates in Africa's most industrialized country. The city of Cape Town has also served the body corporate of the Overbeek building in Kloof Street with a notice to remove advertising space on the side of the building. The modest projected growth also from the global economies, also in our Facebook page, will impact efforts to pursue all three major areas of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. You can look at that on our Facebook page. It says there economic growth on our SABC Facebook page, or visit us at www.sabc.co.za/with-news. Well, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that with more on what's happening on the African continent.
AKA went overseas to win 2 awards for himself for Best South African Male Artist and a second one for his hit track All Eyes on Me. The Lamb film is nominated for Best Foreign category at the 2016 Oscars.
We couldn't find finance until the script won a very prestigious prize in France.
Dr. Pascal has inspired many in song and theatre presentation.
And in 1985, when I came, I went to the SABC on the radio, and I was the voice of Africa.
Catch Trends every Friday at 9 p.m.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at some of your comments now. The World Economic Forum is underway in Davos, Switzerland. Let's take a look at some of your tweets. And please remember to send us your tweets to at SABC Newsroom. That's our Twitter handle. Let's take a look at the first one. This one from Mpa. It says here, if you can't get your organization to accelerate at dramatic speed, the ability to develop tech that will allow you to win, you are falling behind, says Mpa Slabatsis. Alice Charles says today infrastructure and urban development CEOs meet with government to discuss policy and the fourth industrial revolution at WEF at Davos, says Alice. And this one from Omri says multinational corporations, legal personhood should have souls. Ethics divides dedicated to vetting supply chains and human abuses. That's from Omri. Hernan says, so proud of both the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and the President, Mario Macri, says there. In fact, that one just left my screen, so I couldn't read that one. We'll come back to some of those comments in a short while. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that.
South Africa is the third leading country globally in TB infections.
We have 9 million new cases occurring globally, and 30% of those cases are occurring in the African region.
And there are two broad kinds of drug-resistant TB, so to speak. The one is MDR TB, and the other is XDR TB.
To ensure that everyone who's diagnosed with TB is tested for HIV.
There's grossly inadequate funding for TB. Vaccine, drug and diagnostic research. We need a lot more.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
Well, Tsitsi Monare is standing by with your weather forecast. It's wet and it's raining here in Johannesburg. That was this morning. Let's find out what's happening around the country.
Hello there. Yes, most of South Africa is expecting rain today, and over the next couple of days you should expect some showers towards the western side, particularly for the Northern Cape province. By Friday and Saturday, Northern Cape is expecting just around 80% chance, so a very good chance of rain. Let's have a look at today. There is widespread showers right across the country. A bit of clear conditions towards the Eastern Cape as well as some part of the Western Cape, definitely towards the northern part of Limpopo province and the southern part of Zimbabwe. You should expect clear skies. Over towards Madagascar, also expect rain, particularly towards the western coast. There's strong chance of rainfall. There are possibilities of some thunderstorms will be coming in. Speaking of thunderstorms, there's also some expected into the Eastern Cape province. Please do look out for those. And then fire danger and possibilities of heat wave for the Western Cape still persisting, leading to temperatures being very high, particularly towards places such as Van Reinsdorp as well as over Vredendal. Do expect temperatures there to be into the upper 30s. But nice and cool weather for Walvis Bay. Have a look at it. It's at 24 degrees. Windhoek at 25, and also slightly hotter conditions just over the interior of South Africa, going towards Gaborone in Botswana and towards the northern part of Botswana. For places such as Maun and Khanzi, expect temperatures to be quite high along those parts. And cooler weather for Pretoria today. It's now at 27. Johannesburg is also much cooler amidst the rainfall that we've been receiving. So wet and slippery roads are expected, so please drive carefully in most parts. And then as we move into the central parts of Africa, do expect rainy conditions from Nairobi to Kampala as well as over Kigali. Definitely over Dar es Salaam. Do expect some strong chance of showers. The purple shade there indicating isolated, becoming scattered thunder showers right through Lilongwe into Malawi and all the way towards Zambia. Also expect possibilities of rain. In terms of temperatures, Kinshasa is at 33 degrees. Showers are expected from Brazzaville to Luanda as well as over Kinshasa. Libreville also, but not so much. We're expecting just up to a 30% chance of rain along those parts. And sunny skies for Bangui as well as over Juba, going all the way towards Addis Addis Ababa. Temperatures for Addis at 21 degrees Celsius, so it's getting slightly cooler there along Kenya as well as over Ethiopia. And then for Cairo, not much rainfall is expected over Egypt, spreading all the way towards Port Sudan as well as over Mecca. There is no change whatsoever. It's just expected to be quite sunny, dry weather. A little bit of wind is expected there because of the high pressure cell along those parts. Sunny skies for Luxor going all the way to Cairo, with a little bit of clouds building up later on. And then we're seeing most parts of the Damascus expecting lots of rainfall going all the way towards Baghdad, and temperatures dropping to 4 degrees for Baghdad. So it's getting much cooler along those parts. West Africa is also expected to be dry, possibility of rain towards Abidjan as well as over Conakry. And temperatures are again going to increase quite a bit into the upper 30s. For Niamey, it's at a maximum of 35 degrees. But then cooler weather for Marrakesh, Las Palmas, as well as over Rabat. Algiers is at 17 degrees, including Tunis. And have a look at Dakar, also one of the only sunny conditions towards the western side. Maximum temperatures for Conakry is expected at 31. That is it for the weather. Do stay tuned for more later.
Well, it's Tsitsi Munari with your weather forecast. But hey, Paul, I see it looks encouraging. Rain all over the place in the country.
Yeah, it is a bit encouraging, especially because a dry province there going towards the southern part of Botswana and over the eastern side of Namibia. But there's a good chance tomorrow as well as over into the weekend. So it's good news. Let's hope it persists. The big thing is that the rain must keep on like this for the next couple of days so that we can have a chance at just reducing this drought that we're going through.
Yeah, the drought, especially in the Free State and KZN and the Free State, tremendous drought there. Also the Northern Cape, of course.
Yeah.
And this persistent rain like we've seen here in Johannesburg this morning, is that the kind of rain that we can expect in those areas as well?
Currently in the northwest, towards the southern part of the northwest province, there's some rain. It's been raining for places such as Klerksdorp, and you can see, it's also closer to the Free State province, Bothaville, and places such as Velkom also receiving rain. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. I just want it to last. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, Paul will come back to us a little bit later with whether or not. So thank you so much, Tsitsi. We'll see him a little bit later. Now, later on, in fact, this morning, we expect the National Student Financial Aid Scheme to announce, they are supposed to hold a media briefing this morning to tell us more about how they're going to deal with the distribution of funds. Let's find out from our reporter, Nozintombi Mia, who is there. Nozintombi, a very good morning to you and welcome.
A very good morning to you, Elvis. That's certainly correct. Within the next 10 minutes, the media briefing by NSFAS is expected to start. And there really are two critical issues that are expected to come out of it. You'll recall that an additional 6.9 billion rand was given to the higher education sector. 4.6 billion rand of that is going specifically to NSFAS. And NSFAS is going to be explaining to us how they're going to distribute this 4.6 billion rand that they've been given by the Department of Higher Education, and how exactly they're going to change the issue of the means test. And this is critical because the NSFAS system uses a specific system to test whether or not students qualify for financial aid, and they use a means test. And this means test has been exceptionally narrow in terms of the definitions used to be able to give students funding. And they're going to be telling us about this new model that will look at a new way of dealing with the means test and how they'll be able to give funding to students who are really the most needy and need to get a higher education qualifications.
Now, we expect them to tell us more about that, but and as you said, the definitions were very narrow because you find that needy students are being included and those right in the middle are being excluded.
It certainly is a case of the missing middle. And to give you a practical example, it would be a single parent that probably has 3 children, 2 in high school and 1 in university, and they can afford to send one child to university, but they cannot afford to send the 2 others. And they're excluded out of the NSFAS funding, whether it's to be able to get bursary or to get financial aid from NSFAS. And this is the critical issue that they need to fix, and they need to be able to tell us what are the new definitions, what are the new parameters. Are they going to extend it for single parents who cannot afford to send all 3 children to school? And what exactly are they going to do going forward? You'll remember yesterday that the chairperson of NSFAS was telling us that this new funding model is not going to happen as from 2016. It's going to start from 2017. So we're anticipating that in today's press conference, NSFAS will be able to give us a broader definition of how they're going to deal with the missing middle number of students who are looking for funding for higher education, and how exactly that is going to be rolled out as from the 2017-2018 financial year.
Nozi, thank you so much for that update. You'll give us more a little bit later when we cross there live. Nozi Ntombimi, our reporter on the scene. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Thursday, the 21st of January 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News Channel 404. You've just joined us. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. We're asking you a very important question today on Burundi. We're asking you, what can we expect from the United Nations Security Envoy that's visiting Burundi today? I'd like to find out from you, what can we expect? Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Right now, let's take a look at your headlines. The World Economic Forum's annual meeting continues amid a plunge in global markets. The Reserve Bank expresses concern about the impact of the weakening rand on inflation. And the Higher Education Ministry and universities have called on students to end violent and disruptive fees must fall protests. Now, those are all your headlines. First, let's find out from Kendall what's happening on the sports front. Good morning.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much. Quite a lot happening on the sports front, and that tennis match fixing scandal has actually exploded, and it's coming back to haunt everyone. And good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports.
What it is to say. I mean, I've lost that match. I mean, I don't know what you're trying, if you're trying to create a story about that match or that matter.
World number one and defending men's champion Novak Djokovic stepped off court after cruising into the third round to defend his integrity as he gets accused of throwing a match in 2007.
Match points.
Game set. And back on the court, and Andy Murray was in a hurry this morning as he imperiously dispatched Australian Sam Groth in just 90 minutes.
Brilliant display of high quality returning.
It's last chance saloon for the once mighty Proteas test side as they scramble to regain some sort of respectability after being humiliated by the touring English. And that's what we've got for you in the sports in about 20 minutes or so. Be sure to stay around for all of that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later. Let's now cross live to the NSFAS media briefing at the proceedings live in Houghton in Johannesburg.
Have and create an opportunity to deal particularly with those issues that affect NSFAS at the universities, and therefore extending and maybe elaborating from the discussions and the statements that were made by the minister yesterday. So that's the purpose of today's meeting. And yesterday, as we said, NSFAS was represented by myself and the executive officer, Msulwa Daka, and the general manager for loans and bursaries, Jomo Jacobs, who's here. We attended the minister's briefing as well as a meeting between the minister and the vice chancellors of all the 26 public universities. And the meeting was discussing the issues around the start of the 2016 academic year, as well as the implementation of the decisions of the Presidential Task Team on short-term student funding challenges, particularly those that are facing the poor and the missing middle students. And the meeting was one of many stakeholder engagement initiatives we've had to attend as the National Student Fund Aid since 2015. And this includes meetings and workshops we've had with financial aid officers, the student leadership, the funders, the student bodies themselves, the government departments, the sector education and training authorities, the SETAs, the banking association, the insurance industry, universities, and TVET colleges. And we're working very hard to improve our stakeholder satisfaction across the board to build and maintain public confidence that will attract potential sources of funding from non-governmental organizations, the private sector, private individuals, all of which could be both local and international. And all of these different stakeholders, we believe, should certainly play a role in supporting tertiary education, but particularly support financial assistance to poor and missing middle students. NSFAS recently met with the student formations to outline the 2016 budget and processes. Just on the eve of the hashtag Fees Must Fall campaign in 2015, we had successfully completed the student leadership and capacity building workshops with all of the student representative councils at 50 TVET colleges and 26 public universities. And I just want to touch on the budget allocation, which was touched on by the Minister yesterday. And as announced by the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Blade Nzimande, the NSFAS budget has been increased from 9.5 billion rand in 2015 to 10 billion rand in 2016-2017 financial year. Of this amount, over 700 million rand has been allocated for full bursaries in scarce and critical skills for the current year. This funding is made available through the financial aid offices at universities, and students who are enrolled in critical skills study programs, which include science, commerce, health sciences, engineering, and many others, should apply for this funding. The additional funding, which has been announced, actually was announced by the President in his January 8th statement to the nation, which is the 4.582 billion rand that government will allocate across the system, will provide, firstly, for loans of some 2.543 billion rand to assist 71,753 identified students who qualified for NSFAS funding but were either partially funded or not funded at all over the 3 past academic years in 2013, 2014, and 2015. An additional 2.039 billion rand has been made available to ensure that any of the NSFAS qualifying students still in the university system in 2016 are supported financially to continue and complete their qualification. And this funding is in addition to the 10 billion rand that have been allocated in NSFAS in the 2016-2017 financial year. So in total, the budget that will be administered by NSFAS this year comes to 14.582 billion rand. And NSFAS has communicated the administrative guidelines with all the 26 public universities detailing the processes that are going to be followed for the disbursement of this 4.582 billion rand of additional funding. And I must say some of the rules which apply to this additional funding, for instance, include one, the fact that no NSFAS qualifying student who's been offered a place at a university in terms of the university's enrollment plans should be denied access to any public university based on financial need. Clearly, if students have not met the university's requirements in terms of academic progress, this has got nothing to do with us. And I just want to touch on the 2016 registration fees and the upfront payments. No student who meets the NSFAS means test who's been offered a place at any public university will be required to pay upfront payments or registration fees when registering for the 2016 academic year. We have already paid the universities and TVET colleges a total of 1.8 billion rand for the registration fees in advance for all of the NSFAS qualifying students already. So that money is already with the universities. And we expect that our universities will effectively implement this decision. We have trained all the financial officers, the financial aid officers, on the administration of the funds, and therefore we remain confident that these administrators will be able to reinforce the rules of the scheme. A roving team of some 23 NSFAS technical personnel have been dispatched to support the TVET colleges and the universities who may be in need of any support during this period. Secondly, I also just want to talk about the administration of the historic debt. The historic debt, this was the debt that accumulated in the years 2013, 2014, and 2015 for NSFAS qualifying students. And this historic debt of all the students who qualify for NSFAS funding has been resolved. So there's the 2.543 billion rand, which will assist the 71,753 students who have qualified for NSFAS funding, who are either partially funded or unfunded at all. And this funding will be made available to those qualifying students who are studying in those years, in the 2013, 2014, and 2015 years. And these students would either have been unfunded or underfunded, and in essence, it means that that debt which they owe the universities will now be taken over by NSFAS. And the funding aimed at clearing this debt will be through a scheme which we have arranged in working with the universities and government, because there's a component of it which will be converted to a bursary, applying the NSFAS rules that we have. The balance will then be loans that are given to those students, again using the terms and conditions which apply to all of the NSFAS loans that we have already in the system. And we've taken a decision as NSFAS that the administration of this historic debt will obviously go into the system, will pay the capital amount owed to the universities. The accounts submitted to NSFAS will have no interest charged, and any interest previously charged by the universities on these accounts should be reversed by the universities. So just to make it clear, all of the interest which was charged by the universities already on that historic debt has to be reversed. So we'll only compensate and pay the universities the capital amount that is owed to them, and then enter into agreements with those students. And NSFAS will pay for only the students that met both the academic and the financial needs criteria. And payments will be effected for students who are still studying, or those who have dropped out and graduated within the stipulated time in the academic years. Let me just talk about the role of the affected students. The message to students is quite simple. Government has made money available to clear the historic debt. However, to access this funding as a qualifying student, certain conditions must be met. Number one, a student should always be studying or should have been studying in 2013, 2014, and 2015 academic year. Secondly, a student should have applied for NSFAS funding during those years. Thirdly, a student should have been unfunded or partially funded by NSFAS during the 3-year period. And number 4, a student should sign a new loan agreement form that would assist NSFAS to clear the historic debt. And obviously, there's a component which is a scholarship if they meet the academic success criteria, but there will be a component which is a loan which will be recovered in terms of the normal NSFAS recovery rules. And universities play a crucial role in the administration of this fund. And about 70% of the student population funded by NSFAS is assisted through the financial aid offices. And therefore, NSFAS will continue to work with the universities to ensure that they identify the deserving students who qualify for NSFAS funding. And the selection criteria based on NSFAS means test tool, which by and large considers financial readiness or neediness and academic performance, is utilized in this case. And the tool assesses the extent to which the student family can make a contribution to the full cost of study. And it assesses the financial position of the family in terms of the income against the cost of living to determine the relative expected family contribution, which is what we call the EFC, for that particular student. And in order for the student to be considered for NSFAS funding, they also have to make sure that the financial aid with all the relevant supporting documentation is submitted so that their expected family contribution can be determined. And students who are then ranked are those who at least are able to make a contribution to those who are able to, obviously complete their studies until such time that they, find employment. And they only start repaying the loans to the extent that they earn at least 30,000 Rand. And there's a formula which is included in the agreement that is entered into with the students. And we must emphasize here that NSFAS has sent a historic debt loan agreement form to all the universities to be completed by students in respect of those 3 years, the 2013, 2014, and 2015 year. And a separate agreement form will have to be completed in respect of this year, the 2016 year, for those students who are still continuing at the universities. And NSFAS will pay the universities upon receiving the completed loan agreement forms, and universities will work with us at NSFAS to ensure that there's sufficient communication to students and former students who meet the criteria for this fund. I now want to move on to the new funding model for poor and missing middle students. And I must emphasize here that that model is still being worked on, so I will not be able to deal with some of the details relating to the model. I'll just cover some of the key principles, perhaps in the questions and answer session later on. All I want to say at this stage is that the process to develop a new funding model, as recommended by the Presidential Task Team, has been put in place under my chairmanship as the chairperson of NSFAS. And this new model seeks to provide loans and bursaries to the current NSFAS qualifying students at universities, as well as the so-called missing middle. And the new model is planned for piloting next academic year in 2017, with full implementation expected in 2018 academic year. Some of the funds that we manage at NSFAS cover some of these specific areas, and I just want to touch on two of these areas. And the one is the disability funding, because very often, when we communicate in terms of the kind of different funds, and we administer about 25 different funds, the disability funding is available. In December 2015, we have approved a new and a more inclusive policy on disability funding. And working with Higher Education Disability South Africa, we have taken into consideration other forms of disabilities that may have crucial implications in determining and assessing the kind of assistance we should be providing, in addition to paying for tuition and other allowances. And that information is available on our website and is available at our call centers. The skills funding is the second category that I want to just deal with. The Human Resources Development Council, which is chaired by the Deputy President of the country, of the Republic, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, is developing South Africa's human resources strategy, which is identifying some critical and scarce skills which are required to support the National Development Plan. What is required is to better align the strategies of the various stakeholders to produce these scarce skills. And these stakeholders include the Department of Basic Education, universities, TVET colleges, as well as NSFAS on the supply side, and the employers and the programs which support entrepreneurships on the other side, on the demand side. And I just want to talk very briefly about the recoveries process. NSFAS loan book has the potential to inject a significant amount of growth to the pool of funds which are disbursed to students annually. All loans recipient of the scheme and society in large should be made aware of the importance of repaying their loans. Whilst there have been challenges on this front, much more vigilant and diligent action will yield positive results. And we've started the process already of improving our efficiencies and the processes of recoveries and collections. And repayments of NSFAS loans can go a very long way to assist students who need financial support to further their studies at public and higher education institutions. The NSFAS board has put in place strategies in collaboration with other entities to recover the monies from debtors who are gainfully employed and can give positive consent for deductions from their payroll to make other acceptable arrangements to repay the loans. The aim is to improve how we collect and thus maximize the recoveries. And since the launch of the campaign in 2015 in October, we've already seen an increase from 12,000 first-time players who are already paying their loans. And this is very positive in as far as we are concerned. And the decision was made to make the repayment terms affordable, because we know that the majority of our debtors come from low-income households. And interest is only charged 12 months after the student has completed their studies, by either graduating or obviously if they've dropped out but have found gainful employment and they are already earning at least 30,000 rand or more per year. And this means that a debtor who would start repayment at 3% of their annual salary, which increases to 8% or more when a salary reaches 59,300 or more per year. So the terms and conditions which apply to the repayment are really, really good. And for example, a beneficiary will pay back about 900 rand a year on a salary of 30,000 rand a year, or 84 rand a month. And interest is charged at 80% of repo rate, which is the repurchase rate, which is determined by the Reserve Bank, where they lend to commercial banks. NSFAS will continue to charge interest on all outstanding balances. It is therefore very important for beneficiaries to start repaying their loans as soon as possible. And in order to assist as many students as possible, we've improved our operations. And during the 2016 registration period, our contact centers operating hours have now been increased from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the evenings, Monday to Friday, as well as from 8 a.m. to 16:30 or 4:30 on Saturdays in the afternoon. In addition to the normal operating hours, 10 inbound contact center agents were employed and trained to assist with the student application queries. And at the moment, we have 38 agents that deal directly with all of the inbound calls. And this has helped us a great deal to improve our service levels and as well as customer satisfaction. And since the beginning of the period of this academic year, we've received a total of some 25,076 calls, and we've processed some 19,000, just over 19,000 inquiries through our email system. So we're improving the efficiencies and how we operate. We have people on the ground working with the universities, especially the loan offices, to make sure that the processes of registration, the application for NSFAS funding, the administration across all of the activities of NSFAS is properly handled. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Now, I think we'll take some round of questions for the panel to answer. But I'm not sure if you've been given the statements. Can we just make sure that everyone has a statement? Let me start by observing the hands through questions. And just to introduce yourself, the station you come from, the media house. Thank you. We'll take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll take another round. We'll take 6 questions.
Good morning, Chair. Karen Labuskati from Tower FM. Just regarding this increase in the additional funding, if you can perhaps give us more details of how it has affected your work in allocating these extra billions, if there were any challenges or anything like that. And then also, we do understand with this piloting system that you are planning that there are talks of perhaps bringing on commercial banks to establish public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take a few questions and then we'll answer them at the same time.
Morning to the panel. My name is Jan Davnova from Eyewitness News. I know that the details of the funding model haven't been hashed out yet, but the concerns raised by the student leaders is that while they acknowledge the additional billions that have been injected, they say that by the way the scheme is set up, they're in debt by the time that they even leave university, which is precisely why they've continued their protest action and calls for free education. So I was just wondering if this new funding model will take such concerns into consideration.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Batile Paladi from the Citizen newspaper. Chairperson, on accommodation, in most years and even in recent years, we experienced cases where students who are under NSFAS didn't have accommodation for almost 6 or 7 months. The money was only paid into their accounts in August. So they were struggling to really go to campus, traveling because they didn't have money. How is the back payment and how is it going to be resolved? How are they going to manage being on campus and traveling because they really don't have money? And my second question is on the students that have used NSFAS previously. You have mentioned that there are some that are paying, but I want to know what will happen to those that are not adhering to the promises of paying when they are now working.
Okay, next.
Chairperson, let's give you an opportunity to respond.
All right. The additional funding, just over 4.5 billion, and clearly has created additional demand for NSFAS, for us at NSFAS, to increase the resources that we have, as well as the capacity from human capital to our systems and so on. And we already have worked and are working with government to make sure that that capacity is available. I mentioned some of the additional resources that we're already making available to universities to support the universities, because in a number of cases, in fact in the large part of cases, a lot of students that may be owing universities in terms of the historic debt actually interact with the university. So that's why it's important for us to have the capacity on the ground there. But we've done the same in terms of increasing capacity at NSFAS itself, and we're busy doing that as we speak. So that has been taken care of. As far as the new model is concerned, and I will answer both questions, in fact, that deal with the new model. The new model seeks to address a number of things. It addresses the funding needs of students on the basis that the poor students, and obviously based on a relative means test that will be a lot more sophisticated than the means test that is very crude that we apply at the moment. So the means test will look at household income. We'll look at not just household income. We'll look at, for instance, where does a family spend their money, how many people do they have, how much disposable income do they have, and so on. And therefore, those people who, because we have cases, for instance, of a person who may be earning, let's say, 200,000 rand, but they have 11 children to support. It's not the same. The financial affordability of that person is not the same as a person who may be earning 150,000 rand and have one child. So we are going to build instrument and models to be able to, in a very scientific way, determine how much households can really afford. And therefore, for people who are poor, what we're trying to do, and obviously there are a number of things that would be required to really meet what is already, was the decision, for instance, in Polokwane, which is contained in the policy, of government, which is to make sure that we are making tertiary education accessible and affordable. And we're applying those principles across. And therefore, the level of subsidies, for instance, will be very depending on the income levels of the different people. And in as far as the consideration of the model for very poor students or students that come from very poor backgrounds, the model takes care of all of that. The second issue which the model tries to address that we are building is the issue of the high dropout rate of particularly the poor students, because our dropout rate is really high. So especially for students that come from rural areas and township and may find themselves, for instance, in universities that are based in the cities and so on, you need a lot more than just financial support. You need academic support, you need life skill support, psychosocial support and so on. So we're trying to build a model where we will work with universities as well as other stakeholders in improving the success of those students. And thirdly, one of the problems that we've seen is a high incidence, especially of students from poor backgrounds, in finding employment. So we're going to work with all the stakeholders, including the private sector, to make it easier for students when they complete to find employment. So those are just some of the elements which are not currently in the NSFAS model, which are going to be in the model in the future. Yes, we are looking at a model that is going to leverage the funding that comes from government, particularly with funding that comes from other sources, including the private sector, the NGOs, both local as well as international. So the idea is to create enough funding capacity to fund poor students. And I must make it clear here that the model does not seek to fund students who come from wealthy backgrounds. So children who come from wealthy backgrounds are not going to be covered in the model that we are working with, particularly focusing on poor students and the so-called missing middle students. As far as the accommodation issues are concerned, let me allow my colleagues here to deal with the issue. And this also, and I'll touch on maybe before they do, the debt which is owed by people who are already working, who are unwilling to pay. I won't talk about people who are unable to pay because they may not necessarily be working. People who are unwilling to pay and are already earning income and are simply refusing to pay, who are simply going to be following the normal debt recovery process for those people in a way which is a lot more robust and a lot more efficient than what we may have done in the recent past. We'll follow all the processes that are determined by the National Credit Act.
Thank you. I'll answer the question on accommodation. And this does not only, it didn't only affect accommodation, it affects many other forms of allowances where students were in some instances given these allowances late. And we're working with the universities to improve some of these processes as they currently stand. There are two things that NSFAS is doing. Is to work with the universities to improve this process, but some universities were claiming that they have got their own cash flow challenges. What we then have done this year is to advance to universities in January 1.8 billion rand, so that the university cannot claim that we don't have money, that's why we're not giving student books. That's one of the things that we're doing to resolve it. But at a much more systemic level, NSFAS is moving from a university-administered system to a NSFAS central administered system. That system has already started in few universities and we're rolling it forward until 2018. We want to finish the rollout of that process in 2018. It will then help us to be able to control all those disbursement processes and make sure that we're able to disperse allowances to students on time.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to comment on the question raised by Zianda about the students saying when they start working, they're already in debt. You see, probably we should define that. We call this a loan, but if you really look at it, it's just a contribution back to NSFAS for having to have assisted you. I think the Chair has alluded earlier in the statement that would charge 80% of the repo rate, which is far less than where you can get any money anywhere. And for instance, if you go to university and pass all your modules of your first year and you're doing a 3-year degree, and we loan you 10,000 rands. At the end of the year, when you pass all your modules, 40% of that is a bursary. Now you own the scheme 6,000 rand, and the scheme does not charge interest. You go into your second year, we give you another 10,000 rand. You're going to pay us 6,000 rand if you pass all your courses. The scheme does not charge interest. You go to the third year, you pass all your subjects, then you don't pay us at all. So out of those 3 years, you now owe 12,000 out of the 30,000 given to you. And we still don't charge interest. We wait for 12 months for you to get gainful employment, or you can start getting a job, but we'll wait for 12 months before we start with interest. And still the interest is still lower. So that is actually a contribution to say, we have assisted you, we don't have enough funds to assist all our young people, make a contribution to assist us. That is why you've got the NSFAS CEO now, because we paid for him. I studied through NSFAS myself. The Director General of Treasury that gave us the money is a NSFAS recipient. So we wouldn't have those people in those positions to give us the money. We wouldn't be disbursing. I would be sitting here if NSFAS didn't make a contribution. We probably make a contribution in the lives of many other people, young people, who are making meaningful contribution in our country. So the issue of saying the students will be in debt, it's actually not actually the real debt. It's a contribution you're making, and this as a loan, I don't think it's even properly defined. If you also look at where NSFAS come from 1991 when it started with 7,000 loans, we are now going to be disbursed this year 12 billion, 14 billion rands, by the way, that we have. And out of that, if you look at our last annual financial statement, we given more bursaries than loans. So we are actually a bursary scheme more than we are a loan scheme.
Thank you. More questions?
Hi, Karen and Mal from Network 24 and beyond. These are just to clarify two things that I'm just not sure of. Where did the additional 4.5 billion come from? Is it from Treasury? Is it from the recovery funds from NSFAS? Or is it from the private sector? And then just as a follow-up question to the new model, when you said that it's not looking at funding wealthy students, do we know how many students will benefit from this, or what percentage of the current student population will benefit from it? Thanks.
Thank you so much. My name is Rosendombi Mia from SABC TV News. While I commend the fact that US NSFAS has taken up the cry of the students who are complaining about the fact that they're not getting adequate funding, my question really is, why did it take so long for NSFAS to jump on board on the fact that we had to have a fees must fall protest, on the fact that you had to be given encouragement by the presidential task team?
I'm Bongani Nkosi from the Sowetan. So the Minister of Higher Education and Training last year indicated that the scheme would actually need 36 billion for varsities and 15 billion for FETs. But now we are talking about roughly 14 billion that the scheme has. Does this indicate that the scheme is still on a back foot?
Okay, Chair.
Yeah. Right. Let's just start with Karin's questions. The 4.6 billion rand is completely and 100% coming from government. So clearly the Department of Higher Education has already approached National Treasury, so they're working with National Treasury in terms of identifying exactly where the total amount has come from. So it is completely and totally government. How many students are going to be covered or benefit from the new model that we're working on? It's very difficult to determine at the moment because we're talking about a model that will be implemented in 2017. We have never really done, as NSFAS today, a means test of how many students are actually this so-called missing middle. That information is still being collated, and as we build the model, we'll have a much better understanding of how many students are going to be covered. But also, thirdly, it depends on where the cutoff point is going to be in the definition of the so-called missing middle. I talked about the sophisticated means testing model that we are going to be putting in place. We still need to determine what do we regard as missing middle? What do we define that to be? Obviously at the moment there are different numbers that are bandied about. People talk about 300,000, others talk about 400. Is it 600,000? We still need to determine that, and that will have obviously a direct bearing on the number of students that can be covered under this model. The question on why did it take so long, I guess all of the issues that are being dealt with in the country today, especially those that pertain to tertiary education, are issues that have been given a lot more focus, particularly in the last 4 months or so. And this includes the functioning of NSFAS, the processes of where funding actually comes from, the funding of the tertiary education sector, and so on. So some of these things were already being looked at by government or NSFAS, and clearly what we've seen happening in the country over the last 4 months particularly has elevated the urgency of dealing with these issues. And this includes, for instance, making sure that the efficiencies and the capacity at NSFAS is improved, and so on. So I think the important thing is that a lot is being done now to address these issues. Bongani's question on, are we still on the back foot? The total amount that the minister was referring to was a total amount that is required to cover not only the NSFAS qualifying students using the criteria today, which just using the means test is the 122,000 rand and less from a household income. He was referring to if we have to find money to cover all of the students, including the missing middle students. In other words, the poor students and the missing middle students, the total funding that will be required for that is in the order that the minister had indicated. So the 14 billion is still only covering the NSFAS funded students. In other words, the students who qualify for NSFAS funding in terms of the criteria that we use today. So the 14 billion does not cover the missing middle students. As was announced yesterday, all of the universities are working on programs that will assist the missing middle students. So that is not part of the 14 billion.
Thank you very much. There's still more questions? Got 2 questions. While I'm this side, I'll ask for money.
So are we saying that everyone who qualifies for NSFAS this year is going to be funded? We are not going to see the trends that we are used to, that our students are being told that there's this varsity and that varsity have run out of NSFAS funding, so we can't fund anymore.
Yeah, I can just deal with that question quickly. As a student, you have to have been offered a position at a university and you qualify for NSFAS funding for you to receive the funding that's been made available. So if, for instance, you had not applied, you were not offered a position, you may still come from a poor background, universities can't change the enrollment plans which they have, which they've agreed with the Department of Higher Education and Training.
And in addition, Bongani, one of the things that usually disturb registration is students that owe universities from previous years. All the NSFAS qualifying students as we stand now are all funded, not only for 2016, but for the previous academic years. Those are either unfunded or underfunded in the previous 3 academic years are also funded, which means we won't have an issue where students are trying to register but can't register because they owe the universities, because the 2.5 billion rand is precisely to cover the debt that is owed by those students to the university.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just doing a follow-up on accommodation there.
Okay.
If I had correctly, they said that they will organize with the university to pay the money for accommodation earlier to avoid students not having accommodation. Yeah, but the problem is that I'm going to talk from experience as well, because I was a NSFAS student. In universities like University of Pretoria, they don't have South Point that take students because they are NSFAS. They are private accommodation. If you didn't get rest, they are private accommodation which they need cash. They don't need arrangement from NSFAS. They need cash. They need to know, do you have money to pay monthly? So I would like to really get clarity on that. If you are a NSFAS student staying in DREP, how much do you receive for accommodation? And if you're a private student staying in accommodation, whether a room, whether a commune, how much will you be receiving each month, or as an allowance to pay your accommodation? Thank you.
Hopefully, Bathina, you've repaid or are repaying a loan. That's good.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, panel. I would like also first to commend your office hours for extending the hours. They are on the ball, but for the website, there seems to be a bit of you applying online and it seems to be stuck. How do you deal with that?
Okay.
Good morning, Simpion Gomez Zulu from ANN7. I just needed some clarity on the 33,000 Rand the people who earn 33,000 Rand who will be expected to pay. What happens to those who earn less? Does it mean that you will be waiting until they can afford to pay that amount?
Okay.
Thank you. Over to you.
Right. I'll ask both my colleagues here to deal with the accommodation question, the website, as well as the income threshold.
Let me start with the income threshold question. Former students that earn less than the threshold don't have to repay, but they may voluntarily choose to start repaying, but they don't have to repay in terms of the schemes, in terms of the rules of the scheme. We are also looking at the threshold of 30,000 because it has been there for quite some time. But we want to encourage people to start paying as quickly as possible, even if it's small amounts. We think it helps the current students, because once they start repaying, we use that money to pay for the current students, and that's how the scheme is run. That money just circulates in the system. People like me were funded by the scheme, will fund the current students, and then the current students will fund the future students, and that's how the scheme is run. We're trying to circulate that money to help to assist more students. On the accommodation question, what NSFAS does in terms of setting up the rules, it sets the rules because we've got an agreement with the universities to administer the funding on behalf of NSFAS. UP, for instance, will administer funding on behalf of NSFAS, take applications, apply the ministers, determine which students will be funded, and UP will get a basket, say 250 million. That this is the 250 million that we get from NSFAS. And therefore, from that point, then we'll say to UP, we as NSFAS will pay up to 71,800 per student. And therefore, the UP will then apply that 71,000 to all the allowances and tuition for the students. Say, give you tuition for so much, and therefore these are the allowances that can be afforded within that. But again, and again, as NSFAS, we will not set a price for accommodation, because the accommodation in Hatfield might not be the same as accommodation in the medical school in terms of pricing. We have to make sure that the university, which is much closer there, pays the correct price for accommodation, because we don't want to overpay for that accommodation, because that means we will not fund some students that we wanted to fund. I will ask my colleague to deal with the questions on the website.
We just to add first on the issue of accommodation and the new system that we're using. In I think more in the TVETs and some universities, that we have realized that, for instance, we gave 1.8 billion to the universities. Part of it is to make sure that registration is paid, and upfront in terms of allowances. Students are assisted at the beginning of the year, and the process of claiming money from NSFAS has been taking the time that it will take a bit longer. So we came up with a new student-centered model where we make sure that immediately when the students get into the institutions and they are returning, we can pay allowances to students and for their accommodation through our SBAC system. So that's the system we're implementing as well. We have looked at, and we've started a process of looking at our website, which is much more corporate and doesn't even allow students, because we're dealing our stakeholders, and our biggest stakeholders is young people, and they would want something that would, resonate with them, and they could get things much more easier to navigate. So we are working on that, and I think in the next couple of months you are going to be seeing a new revamped NSFAS website.
Thank you very much. If there are no more other questions, are there any other questions? No. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this media conference. On behalf of the panel, I would like to thank you, and I would like to encourage those that studied through NSFAS to start paying, because we know you.
We're going to find you.
We are going to find you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
You just came until what is that?
11:30. Yeah, it's 10 to 11. So I can do a few.
Well, that was the NSFAS briefing, and Houghton in Johannesburg, giving some clarity in terms of the funding, but not as much clarity as I would have liked. Maybe you would need more, because they did indicate that the 14 billion rand, more than 14 billion rand, was for needy students. But the middle grouping that we're talking about, and that's the missing middle that is being referred to, has not been addressed in terms of how much money and how it will be allocated. There will be more coming out of that a little bit later. 14.5 billion rand, 2.5 billion rand, we believe, is for the benefit of the 71,000 students, and there was also just over 2 million rand for students that qualified. That's in addition to the 10 billion that was made available for 2016. Well, we'll take a break right now, and we'll be right back after that.
Step up, people of the party. We need your energy, your greatness. Just because you don't do it for money doesn't make you an amateur. Yes, we salute you, party comrade, with a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label for just $169.99 from Tops at Spa.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon, only on the SABC News channel.
Health workers are at risk of violence all over the world. In South Africa, nearly half of the nurses suffer abuse at some point in their careers. The violence range from harassment to assault, both verbally and physically.
Violence, it has a psychological, emotional, impact on a person, particularly if it's verbal. Whatever words the perpetrator may actually have used on the victim, you find that it can affect the victim psychologically as well as emotionally. Where you find that some people actually they become withdrawn, and some people they become sick, they don't come to work, or they can actually be aggressive in some instances against everybody at work. So that's why we have a system in place where we do counseling for them. And if it's actually physical, employees are made aware that they can actually even report to either labor, which is an internal body to assist them. But if they feel that it's not enough, and they can actually go and report it even to the police if it's physically and they feel that they really want to open a case against the perpetrator.
Many more are exposed to verbal aggression, and in most cases, the perpetrators are patients or visitors.
I have personally been violated by relatives, and you find that in cases whereby they have their patient here, they want to come and see their patient at any time. And when you try to explain to them that we have visiting hours that are stipulated to say from 3 to 5, they'll say no. It's our patient, it's our family, it's our relative. We have to see them whenever we want to see them. And then even though you try to show them, okay, this is the policy that's written down, they don't understand because they want to see their relative at any time that they want to or they feel they can see him. Sometimes the community is not being fair on us staff, including nurses, doctors and all.
I haven't been physically attacked. But we are not brought up in the same way. There are people who are very rude when they consult. There are people who are insulting and all that. But as a health professional person, you don't take that to heart or to hate. You just think, okay, there must be an underlying reason for the person to behave the way he or she is behaving. So normally I don't take it personally.
Categories of health workers most at risk include nurses and other staff directly involved in patient care, emergency room staff and paramedics.
The nurses, it's not fair on them to be violated. The young doctors, any doctors, they also get it. They get their share. They get their fair share, but the nurses get it first.
Violence against health workers is unacceptable. It has not only a negative impact on the psychological or physical well-being of healthcare staff, but also affects their job motivation.
Most of the health workers, some of them, they still don't come out, to report violence in the workplace. And so we encourage them actually to speak out and to report violence in the workplace. And we still have to, as staff in the wellness, we still also have to do a lot of marketing and, make the staff aware of the programs that we have in terms of the procedures to follow when there's the workplace violence. Some of them, they still don't know what procedures to follow, who to contact. So that one also, it's a limitation on our side, but we are working on it. So I would encourage them to speak out and to come forth and to report.
All healthcare workers in South Africa devote their lives to working under all types of conditions in order to improve the lives of South Africans in need of public health care.
I feel that it's unfair for the nurses to be violated while they are working in their working place, because they are here to serve a purpose, to help the community and to help the patient. So people are coming with different ideas of but to be the principle. To say we've got an access to come in, I've got a right to stay with my patients. These are the problems that we are having. Most of the time they just want to sit with their family inside. Just imagine if you've got one patient with 20 relatives. It's not fair for other patients and we are unable to work. That's where the problem comes and they fight a lot.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Thursday, the 21st of January 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube if you missed us here, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Question of the day. We're asking you, what can we expect from the UN envoy's visit to Burundi? Remember, the UN Security Council is there for today. Let us know what's on your mind. At SABC Newsroom, that's the Twitter handle, also on our Facebook page. First, let's take a look at all your news headlines. NSFAS says the budget for the scheme has been increased from 9.5 billion rand to over 14 billion rand for the current academic year. The World Economic Forum's annual meeting continues amid a plunge in global markets. And the Reserve Bank expresses concern about the impact of the weakening rand on inflation. Now, those are all your headlines. There's more coming up as soon as we get out of the way. All the sports news coming up, Kendall.
Absolutely. It's actually been a very interesting start to the year. What with everything else that was going on last year, we now have on our hands a massive scandal in tennis. And now Novak Djokovic is been accused of actually having thrown a match, but I get ahead of myself. Good morning. This is what we've got for you in the sports.
What it is to say. I mean, I've lost that match. I mean, I don't know what you're trying, if you're trying to create a story about that match or that matter.
World number one and defending men's champion Novak Djokovic stepped off court after cruising into the third round to defend his integrity as he gets accused of throwing a match in 2007.
Match point.
Game set match. Back on the court, and Andy Murray was in a hurry this morning as he imperiously dispatched Australian Sam Groth in just 90 minutes. It's last chance saloon for the once mighty Proteas test side as they scramble to regain some sort of respectability and credibility after being humiliated by the touring English. That is what we've got for you in the sports. Be sure to stay around for that at about 11:30 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. And of course, tomorrow we have an entire sports day talking about match fixing, and that's all coming up tomorrow. You don't want to miss that.
Absolutely. It's going to be a cracker and a humdinger.
That's it. That's Kendall Makamati. He'll be back a little bit later. Right now, top story for this hour. NSFAS says that means tests for poor students is to be reviewed. They remodeled structures that look at more than household income. It looks at things like the family spending and monthly debts. NSFAS confirmed that the budget for the scheme has been increased to over 14 billion rands for the current academic year.
The NSFAS budget has been increased from 9.5 billion rand in 2015 to 10 billion rand in 2016-2017 financial year. Of this amount, over 700 million rand has been allocated for full bursaries in scarce and critical skills for the current year. This funding is made available through the financial aid offices at universities, and students who are enrolled in critical skills study programs, which include science, commerce, health sciences, engineering, and many others, should apply for this funding. The additional funding, which has been announced, actually was announced by the President in his January 8th statement to the nation, which is the 4.582 billion rand that government will allocate across the system, will provide, firstly, for loans of some 2.543 billion rand to assist 71,753 identified students who qualified for NSFAS funding but were either partially funded or not funded at all over the three past academic years in 2013, 2014, and 2015. An additional 2.039 billion rand has been made available to ensure that any of the NSFAS qualifying students still in the university system in 2016 are supported financially to continue and complete their qualification. And this funding is in addition to the 10 billion rand that have been allocated in NSFAS in the 2016-2017 financial year. So in total, the budget that will be administered by NSFAS this year comes to 14.582 billion rand. And NSFAS has communicated the administrative guidelines with all the 26 public universities detailing the processes that are going to be followed for the disbursement of this 4.582 billion rand of additional funding. And I must say some of the rules which apply to this additional funding, for instance, include one, the fact that no NSFAS qualifying student who's been offered a place at a university in terms of the university's enrollment plans should be denied access to any public university based on financial need. Clearly, if students have not met the university's requirements in terms of academic progress, this has got nothing to do with us. And I just want to touch on the 2016 registration fees and the upfront payments. No student who meets the NSFAS means test who's been offered a place at any public university will be required to pay upfront payments or registration fees when registering for the 2016 academic year. We have already paid the universities and TVET colleges a total of 1.8 billion rand for the registration fees in advance for all of the NSFAS qualifying students already. So that money is already with the universities. And we expect that our universities will effectively implement this decision.
Let's now go back to Houghton, where our reporter Nozin Tombi Mia is going to have a quick chat with the NSFAS CEO, Musulwa Daka. Over to you, Nozin Tombi. Once again, good morning.
Thank you very much, Elvis, for that introduction. We certainly are standing here with the CEO of NSFAS, who's going to give us a little bit more information about some of the key issues that came out of today's press conference, really looking key at the fact that the total budget for the 2016 financial year stands at over 14.5 billion rand in fees that has been given to you by the Higher Education Department. Just give us a quick recap of how exactly that money is going to be distributed specifically for this financial year.
The amount of money that NSFAS has received, the 10 billion rand, had already been determined as how it's going to be distributed. But 4.5 billion rand mainly is to assist students who owe universities who qualify for NSFAS. And 2 billion rand of that 4.5 will then assist students in 2016 so that even if they are still in the university system, they are able to be funded. And the residual amount that would be left out of that would assist first-time entering students who also qualify for NSFAS and who, when universities don't have sufficient funding to fund those students. The Department of Higher Education and Training has made a call to all universities to ensure that they admit all NSFAS qualifying students within their enrollment plans.
And how does a student qualify for NSFAS? What is the route that they would have to go to be able to apply? Do they apply at the university or do they apply directly to NSFAS?
The majority of students apply directly at universities. They apply through universities, and universities will determine what are the closing dates and the opening dates of application. A few students in about 6 universities apply directly to NSFAS, and those students have already applied, and NSFAS is also assessing additional students now that will be funded as a result of additional funding that has been made available.
And now this additional funding, does this now mean that students can apply directly to NSFAS? You've been given an extra 4 billion rand. Those students who are still needy of NSFAS, do they need to go directly to NSFAS to apply for the funding?
Not necessarily. Most of the students have already applied to the universities. It's just that the universities will now go down the list and fund many more students than they would have if we only had 10 billion rand. Their names are already in the university system and they are now being assessed for funding as part of the additional funding.
The big issue is the issue of the new funding model that looks at the means test but looks at widening the scope of the means test. How is this now going to be implemented?
The presidential testimony had already pronounced on this, that by 2017 we want to have a pilot program on the missing middle. And this project is being run under the chairmanship of the chairperson of NSFAS, Mr. Sizwe Nxasana. And by 2018, the time frame is we must have a fully fledged product that will address the missing middle challenge.
But why did it take NSFAS so long to get to the point where they are dealing with the crisis at hand? Why did it have to take a student protest for there to be change within how the funding system is done and the fact that there should be more funding given to NSFAS?
We should admit that the students have become a catalyst to some of the changes. Some of these discussions were taking place, but maybe they were not taking place at the right speed. And the students came in and became a catalyst to some of these processes. The minister had to get involved, the president has to get involved. And now I think everyone is now much more focused in terms of getting to a solution.
All right, thank you so much. That was the CEO of NSFAS telling us about the fact that, indeed, the new funding model was spurred on by the protest of the students that we saw. The fees must fall from last year, and the fact that they have a new distribution model for how they're going to be funding students who qualify for NSFAS for the 2016 financial year, as well as looking at rolling out the pilot phase of the new funding model as from 2017 and proper implementation from 2018. Back to you in the studio, Alves.
Thank you, Nozin Tombi. That is, you heard there from NSFAS and the media briefing that was held and the issues that came out of that. 2017 seems like that's the date for the missing middle that they've announced there. Now, the Higher Education Ministry and universities have called on students to end violent and disruptive fees must fall protest. Minister Bladen Zamande and the Vice-Chancellors met in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg, yesterday. They revealed that universities affected by the protest have suffered damages worth more than 150 million rand.
Another roundtable meeting to diffuse tensions on campuses and tackle the funding crisis. But massive damages at institutions countrywide as 2015 drew to a close, a sore point. Arson responsible for most of the damage.
We can't afford more damage to institutional assets. Our preliminary damage report suggests an estimated 150 million rands of damage to public property last year.
Universities are set on avoiding a repeat and also want to protect staff and students.
The only reason those private security have been brought on is because registration was being prevented.
The National Student Financial Aid Scheme has scheduled a briefing on the 2016 budget allocations and additional funding.
For this year, 2016, the criteria that NSFAS applies is going to remain as it is. The new model, however, is not addressing just the funding issues for the missing middle. It's addressing the funding issues for poor students and missing middle.
A new funding model is expected to be rolled out from next year. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News, Kempton Park.
The Department of Higher Education and Training has revealed that it's investigating over 100 colleges across the country for allegedly offering unregistered courses. 2 more colleges were bust in the Johannesburg CBD yesterday.
Johannesburg City College unmasked diplomas and degrees on offer without registering them at Higher Education and Training. As the camera started rolling, staff made a duck. And when we followed them, it was clear that no answers would be forthcoming.
Can you open this door, sir? Why are you hiding? Open the door.
Then the institution's head arrived. His explanation: it need not comply with higher education's regulations.
The Constitution says for an independent educational institution to operate, it must be registered with the state. We have our registration documents with the state.
The department rubbished the claim.
The Johannesburg City College is not registered with the department as a private higher education institution to offer those degrees and diplomas, whether he calls it work-based learning, etc., etc.
And the casualties?
This is just some ludicrous, crazy joke of somebody who just chose to wake up and make a school.
The College for Business and Maritime Studies was the next casualty, offering an international diploma without the department's blessing.
You are not registered to offer that diploma. The next step from this is for students to come here. You will register them, and that's illegal.
Crisalda Lewis, SABC News, in Johannesburg.
Now you want to follow this channel because we will expose the issues here next week, sometime on the channel, so you don't want to miss a thing. Stay tuned every day between 9 and 12 right here on your favorite channel, Channel 404. This is Newsroom. The World Economic Forum's annual meeting continues today amid a plunge in global markets. Stocks in Asia, Europe and the United States closed sharply yesterday. Now, new figures show that the Chinese economy grew at the slowest rate, in a quarter of a century in 2015. And the dramatic slump in the price of oil is also a major factor in the market mayhem. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has arrived in Davos, where he says South Africa will present a strong case for investment despite the difficult economic climate.
The cold weather has the South African delegation all fired up and ready to make its case for investing in the country. As the world enters what it's dubbed the fourth revolution, Africa stands ready to embrace the challenge.
If the fourth revolution is coming, is Africa still going to remain behind it as it remained in other revolutions, industrial revolutions in the past? And we are saying, therefore, the issues relating to Africa should feature very highly from the delegation from Africa.
But what about the uncertainty and sometimes mixed messages?
We are going to deal with it, and I think there is a warm feeling towards South Africa here, and I'm sure we are going to be able to convey the message that whatever challenges that are there, we are going to deal with.
For Team SA, it's now hands on deck. It's clear that spirits are high, and there's much anticipation from South Africa's camp. And they know that time to match words with action is now. Mzwandile Mbethe, SABC News, Davos, Switzerland.
Staying in Davos, the leader of a $17 billion Indian company says he's optimistic heading into this year's World Economic Forum. Indira Mahindra is the chair of the Mahindra Group that sells one of India's best-selling cars, with a rising presence here in Africa. He's also positive about the prospects for India while other emerging markets take a beating. Francis Hurd spoke to him in Davos.
How are you feeling heading into Davos? India is a great story, but also some problems with debt, I understand. Your competitor, Tata, in the news today announcing quite significant job cuts. How's your group feeling? How are you feeling heading into this World Economic Forum?
I've been coming here for a while. India's presence has always been very strong at Davos. There's a 100% strong contingent. But I've never been here when there has been so much interest in India. My dance card, as it were, for meetings was filled up almost a month ago by the number of people looking for opportunity in India. So I think more than just the presence of the Indian contingent, it is the focus and the desire to engage with India that I think makes this Davos stand out for us. Clearly, there is India is seen as one of the islands in the sun as far as 2016 goes. And as you know, the last 2-3 days have been quite turbulent as far as China's market is concerned. There's worry about the slowing growth, and therefore India and the US, frankly, are probably the only two large economies in the world that are showing promise of growth heading into 2016. I'm very optimistic for India in general. We can talk more about that. As far as the job cuts of Tata that you mentioned, keep in mind that was for their UK steel interests. They're a very far-flung company, as are we. So companies that are present all around the globe will have areas of light and dark. And I presume that Tatas will also share my enthusiasm about their business in India.
Can we in Africa be excited about India's growth, because we're being so hard hit by what's happening in China? Is this a possible alternative?
Certainly it is. It is a very strong opportunity, but I should caution right away that India is not at the point where it can replace China in the global economy, or for that matter in Africa's economy right away. We are a significantly smaller economy. However, our trajectory is such that we expect to be going down the route that China took some years ago. The investor Masayoshi Son of SoftBank, one of the biggest investors in the world, was recently in India, and he mentioned that he thinks India, in fact, could have a bigger story than China going forward for a number of reasons. So should Africa be optimistic? Yes, but they should not expect that the void created by China's deceleration is going to be filled right away.
A few weeks ago, a real estate agent, Penny Sparrow, remember her, made headlines with her tweets after calling black people monkeys. Today's TNA Breakfast Briefing on Morning Live discussed racism. Now, some viewers on Twitter, they reacted negatively to the topic by saying that they will change the channel because the topic is exhausting. ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe says that we need to be prepared to talk about this topic regardless of how we view it.
If we're not prepared to work on building a non-racial society and be committed to it, and we get exhausted about it, therefore there's something wrong with us as a nation. Because I think Prof made a very important point. In the 50s, 60s, the United States was having a problem in changing what was called the South, which was very racist. And until they confronted that issue, they couldn't engage with it. We should plunge and engage with the issue and say to each other, we as South Africans, we must build a nation. Somebody must be able to let go, and we must allow ourselves to be part of building. You know, one of the issues that is a problem is that if we are not going into details about this, we may relegate the debate into thinking that if you can dispossess every white person in South Africa and redistribute everything to black South Africans, we have resolved the problem. That is not the issue. The issue is that we must build a prosperous South Africa where we can actually benefit, all of us, have access to issues. Access is the starting point. Then development is a process of developing from there. For example, this debate about land, that these small emerging farmers will harm food security. It's a racist debate, because it means you must not have access because dispossession de-skilled you and destroy a relationship with the land. But access to land is the beginning. Then you get skilled when you have access to it. So we must deal with it in practical terms and deal with the issues front-end.
Can't agree with Gwede Mantashe more there. AfriForum CEO, though, Scully Creel, says that contrary to popular belief, the organization is not racist and has no problem with black people. He says if they did, they would have left the country. One of the TNA guests asked why AfriForum really exists.
And the fact that we sometimes have differing views, it creates an impression that we are part of the problem. Democracy is built by differing views, taking part in a public debate, so that we will defend. The fact is also, it actually shows people's lack of knowledge. If you go and read through AfriForum's documents and our statements, I will challenge anybody to come and bring me one racist statement that was made by us. You will see words such as we should foster mutual recognition and respect amongst communities. You would see instances where we not only condemn racism by black people, you would see many statements where we condemn racism by white people. So I think if we want to solve the problem in the country, we need more organizations such as ours. And if I can just mention one thing, the thing that we take quite strongly, when the President said all the country's problems started when Jan van Riebeeck came, he actually said the problem in this country are whites in general and Africans in particular, if I can play with the ANC way that they use those words. And that is an infringement on my children's dignity, because it says you are the problem in this country. But we always say if we fight that and you get angry about it, we have a right to take an issue with that. But in the same sense, then we must also have an issue with Penny Sparrow and condemn the kind of stupid statements and views to think of black people as apes. So in a sense, our organization, and I stand with that, we take a middle road to say we condemn it on all ways, and the problem is that not everybody does that.
The question might be, why do you need to exist? Are there not enough institutions to help you with your cause, Human Rights Council and so on and so forth, that you can go to and say, listen, this is what's happened to me, this is what's happened to us, fix it? Are you saying you have no faith in them? Why do you need to exist as this little organization on the side?
Well, the fact is we've lodged many complaints with the Human Rights Commission about racist statements made, even threats to our staff made by certain radical blacks, and the vast majority of black people don't do this. But then the Human Rights Commission simply don't investigate it. But when Penny Sparrow's issue came to the fore, they on themselves the next day said that they would investigate it even before the ANC laid a charge. I'm not saying that they shouldn't investigate Penny Sparrow on their own. That's their job. They should have done it on the same day. But then they should not ignore these other issues. But we need a situation, if there's at higher education, when there's a meeting of students, people say there should be no room for Afrikaans at universities, which the students said. There should be somebody to say, well, we believe that's wrong, and that is the role we are playing within the framework of the law, peaceful, and that should be appreciated.
And that's an ongoing debate we'll have here on Channel 404. Keep your eyes peeled. The community of Kakamas near Uppington is still reeling after the bodies of 5 children were discovered in a disused fridge yesterday. The 5, all said to be cousins, were aged between 3 and 7 years old. They were in the care of their grandmother. Well, we'll get some more footage a little bit later on that particular story, so you have to stay tuned for more. Now, remember that you can still also engage with us on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. We're asking you that question. What do we expect from the UN envoy to Burundi? As you know, they're there today to see if they can twist the arm of the President, Pierre Nkurunziza, in terms of accepting the troops back or into Burundi to bring stability. Now, Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says that he's concerned about the impact of the weakening rand on inflation. However, he's optimistic that the exchange rate will eventually adjust to fundamentals. Kganyago says that the bank is facing a policy dilemma of slow economic growth and rising inflation ahead of the decision on interest rates next week. Most economists expect an increase on January the 28th. That's around the corner, as a sharply weaker rand and rising food prices fuel inflation. Kganyago says that since the last rate decision, the inflation outlook has deteriorated. The rand depreciated at about 25% against the dollar in 2015. Jailed Abatembu King Buyelekaya Dalindyebo, his condition is improving in a private hospital in East London. Now, that's according to his aide, Pandulwazi Mhlonto, who has visited him. Dalindyebo was readmitted to St. Dominic's Hospital on Sunday after refusing to eat prison food. He is currently serving a 12-year jail term for arson, culpable homicide, and defeating the ends of justice. Burundian ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Isaiah Intirizoshira, has dismissed talks and reports of imminent genocide in the country. Speaking to us a little bit earlier this morning, he says that the country is hoping that the United Nations Security Council's visit in Burundi will yield positive results in the quest to find a workable solution in the political troubled country.
The government of Burundi has been engaging with all these partners since a long time, and it will continue engaging with them. And we hope that this let's say, visit of the UN Security Council to Bujumbura will allow all the parties to really get insight to the real solution of the problem and find, let's say, a common ground so that peace can come back in Burundi. That's the wish of the government of Burundi. That's the wish of the population of Burundi. The political situation will evolve in a way that all the parties will be, let's say, happy of the conclusion of this situation.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sports action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. A panel to review the impact of legislation dating back to 1994 began its work in Parliament this week. Parliament's independent advisory panel is chaired by former President Kgalema Motlanthe. The National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete says the panel will explore what has happened after legislation was passed and how it has impacted on people's lives, especially in dealing with transformation. The panel includes former Justice Minister Bridget Mbandla, the former Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni, land issues expert Dr. Anika Claassen, the former First Rand Group CEO Paul Harris, and former Auditor General Teres Nombembe. Now, the panel is to hold public hearings and submit its report in 12 months. Our parliamentary reporter, Abra Barbia, now joins us from Parliament. Abra, very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you, Elvis. Good morning.
Essentially, what will be the role of the Independent Advisory Panel for Parliament?
Elvis, as you know, the Constitution sets out specifically what its ideal is for the lives of all citizens. It basically wants to improve the lives of all of our citizens, and that's been the role of Parliament since 1994 in terms of the passing of legislation. Legislation has been passed since then, and its main aim was to be in line with the Constitution in that it has to build social cohesion in the country, improve the lives of citizens, ensure that land is distributed equally to eliminate poverty. So this is what this panel is going to investigate. Lots and lots of legislation has been passed, and this panel will now look at exactly how this legislation has filtered down to the ground. I like to use the Domestic Violence Act as an example because I'm very passionate about the police committee and legislation coming out of that committee. Now, the Domestic Violence Act, for example, a woman goes and reports that she's been abused by a partner or a spouse at a police station. It's noted in a register. A year or two later, even a month or two later, that very same partner or spouse will come into that same police station and apply for a gun license. And there will be no cross-checking with the domestic violence register, which the police have at the stations. And that cross-reference then basically determines whether or not somebody will end up having a gun. And obviously somebody who has a violent past will not get a gun. And that's why so many women are killed by their partners with weapons, because of a simple lack of not cross-checking. Now, that is one piece of legislation that's not worked very well, even though it is a very good piece of legislation. So the role of this panel is to basically go down to the ground. It's going to be a very tough job. Go down to the ground, speak to people and ask them exactly how the very important laws that have been passed here at Parliament since 1994 have made an impact on their lives.
What is the timeline for this particular panel to report back to Parliament?
Well, they've been given a year. They have to report back with recommendations next year, by next year this time. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a very tedious task, loads of communities to go through. There are public submissions, public hearings. That's how the panel's going to be doing their work. So whether or not they're going to make that deadline remains to be seen, of course, but their timeline is 1 year.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a very short period. I would have thought probably 2 or 3 years. But a lot has been done since 1994 by government, and surely nation building should feature very prominently for this particular panel. And also the latest raised comments on social media. Would that form part in terms of this advisory panel?
Definitely. There are 4 focus areas. One of the four focus areas actually focuses on nation building and social cohesion. So people will be able to, we talk a lot on social media. We can interact very freely on social media. So now the former president and his team will be able to go into communities and actually have dialogues. They might have those town hall scenario where people from various communities will sit in halls and then they can have their own little debates over there. And I'm sure a lot of issues relating to racism, relating to nation building and social cohesion, I'm sure the debates are going to be very, very heated considering the climate in South Africa at the moment, yes.
Tertiary education, free education that the students want, land reform and economic transformation, probably also high on the agenda, you would say?
And that's why the panel come from such a diverse various backgrounds. We have people like Professor Haroon Borat, who has an economics background, Dr. Annika Klaassen, who is well known for her research in land development, Professor Olive Shana, who is a public health specialist. She has that background, and many, many more. So obviously the people have been handpicked, they've been specifically chosen to focus on key areas such as education, such as health, such as the economy, because essentially these are the various sectors that help improve the lives of citizens holistically.
They will investigate and review the impact of legislation dating back to 1994. So if they make recommendations, will they have teeth to enforce it, or does it go back to Parliament?
It goes back to Parliament. As with most institutions of this nature, as with most advisory panels, recommendations can be made and then Parliament has to decide how it will tackle it from there. They did mention that they have to identify the gaps. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that once gaps are identified, that's where Parliament will come in and they will then look at means to close those gaps. So legislation might go back to departments. Departments might have to rework, tweak certain things. But like I said before, South Africa does have very good legislation. We just seem to be battling with the basics, and that is the implementation. Implementation begins at ground level. Implementation begins with that constable in the police station. That's where implementation actually begins. So it's just a matter of teaching and reinforcing the basics of the legislation to the public servants, the civil servants who are supposed to be enforcing it.
Abra, you touch on a very important point, and that's implementation. One of my key points. Thank you so much for that report. That was Abra Barbia, reporter in Parliament. Now, COSATU is holding a press briefing ahead of its 2-day Bosberaad, where the national office bearers will be outlining the way forward after President Jacob Zuma signed into law the new tax reforms they have labelled anti-worker. And COSATU met with the ANC that promised to take the issue to Treasury on Monday. Let's now cross live to that particular briefing.
It's a coalition that we have agreed to challenge issues that are confronting us, both as the workers of this country, but also as a black business. We will appreciate that we're saying Black Business Council. There's a purpose. The CEO here may talk about why we're saying so when we speak at the right time after we have read the statement here. But on the matter that we are dealing with currently, it's one area again that we have consciously accepted that it affects us almost in the same way, because there are workers in all fronts. Businesses are employing workers, and some business people are conscious about what should be the rights of the workers, hence this coalition. But I will just do it quickly because it's this conference we are jointly addressing it on this issue, wherein the General Secretary will read our statement. That on the left side from BBC, which is Black Business Council, this Faith, my side here, they are the office bearers of the leadership of BBC, who have met with and looked into the issues. I will not say which business they come from. This is the Business Council, Black Business Council. We sit together at NEDLEC. We're confronting these issues. When you say, how does Treasury treat you? We'll all say the same thing. We're being unfairly treated by our Treasury. And we'll take you into a detail. You know Comrade Jojo James, our first Deputy President. Zingiswa Losi, our second Deputy President. Mr. Mahola, the CEO of BBC, next to me here. You know the General Secretary of COSATU, Begin Chalinchali. You know the Treasurer of COSATU, Frida Oosthuizen. Comrade Soli Petu, our Deputy General Secretary, new from the box, who has joined the collective here. From BBC again, and you will remind me again. Yes, the name. Yeah, from BBC will say so. Sis Bridget Hadebe, basically from Samda, but BBC. The young men there who are very quite sharp, I've met them yesterday. They've begun to do wonders in the sector where they are in initiating businesses. We are all here basically to say to South Africa, on this matter that touches on workers, there is no discrimination in terms of how it affects us. It affects us in the same way. The General Secretary will read our statement.
Thank you, Comrade President. Let me read the COSATU statement. COSATU calls on all workers not to resign from their jobs, but to unite and mobilize. That is the title of our statement. The Congress of South African Trade Unions call on all South African workers not to resign from their jobs following the signing into law the tax reform bill that imposes preservation on their retirement savings without consultation. We are issuing a rallying cry on all COSATU members and workers in general to join the Federation in its mobilization efforts for the upcoming campaign to crush this law. While there is no imminent threats that workers will lose their retirement fund, this law means that workers starting from the 1st of March 2016 will no longer have the control of their retirement savings. The state tax clause stipulates that when you die, your assets get taken over by the state. They are literally taking our money from us. Our opposition to this law remains unwavering, and we remain determined to implement our Federation's Congress resolution of fighting the National Treasury's unilateral decision to control and manage workers' deferred wages. The Federation has already issued a call to all affiliates to mobilize workers and their families to come out and protect their savings and their livelihoods. We are determined to wage and win this fight, and we call on for workers' unity around these particular issues. We are busy finalizing our application for a Section 77 notice that will allow us to go on a full-blown strike. Our federation has been very patient on this issue, and we believe that the National Treasurer's intransigence signals that the worst is yet to come. We are going to see more laws enacted to intervene in the workers' and individual rights. An overbearing state is dangerous, especially if it's unilaterally taking decisions and undermining democratic institutions like it has done with NEDLAC. The best defense against all this is an assertive and united workforce. After the Taylor Commission, that was a task with conducting research and advising government on a social security policy reform processes issues, released its report in 2002. It identified critical issues that needed to be addressed as a matter of priority. The report also made clear that there was a need for a comprehensive social security system to address those problems. There was a clear consensus that any retirement reforms without a comprehensive and retirement reform paper will be unacceptable. This law undermines that consensus. The Federation also wants to address the government's assertion that there were proper consultation during the enactment of this law. We want to put it on record that there was never any proper consultation process that covered these issues at NEDLAC, which is the only recognized structure for all social partners to discuss issues of this nature. There was, of course, an informal bilaterals between the Federation and Treasury, where they told us that they were preparing to draft a bill to only address the issue of tax harmonization, which was going to benefit Provident Fund members who are currently taxed at a higher rate as compared to the pension fund members. We only discovered during the informal discussion that they already sneakily smuggled preservation in this draft bill, and that it was when we made clear that we were going to oppose this with all our might. Tax harmonization had our support as a federation because it was about workers paying low taxes, the same as the pensions. To prove that there was never any consultation at NEDLAC, there is no NEDLAC report on these issues. Just to explain that when a policy proposal is made in NEDLAC, after all the discussion have been taken, NEDLAC will issue a report indicating the number of meetings, the issue that were discussed, the conclusion before it's and table that report to the relevant minister. Even if there's no agreement, the report still will be issued. In this case, there's no such a report, which is a confirmation that the NEDLAC processes was undermined. The reality is that workers are not saving enough because they are earning peanuts and are highly indebted. The reason why workers prefer Provident Fund is because they can withdraw all their money in a lump sum. They are able to pay off their debts, and government is criminalizing that chance by passing this law and denying them the right to choose. This law is going to undermine the value of the workers' savings while securing easy profit for the fund managers who are after the profits and are not concerned about the welfare of the workers. This law is now used as a cash cow by unscrupulous service providers who are ill-advising our members to cash in their monies and promise to help them invest it or to create annuities for them. failing to advise them about the tax implication and their brokerage massive fees. The law as it stands will destroy all Provident Fund as we know them. They want us to subsidize white people because white people live longer than the black people. We reiterate our rejection of this piecemeal approach to these social security and retirement reforms and demand a total scrapping of this legislation to allow genuine engagement as agreed at NEDLAC. We reject the notion that workers, black workers in particular, can't manage their financial affairs. This condescending law is not only an insult to workers, but smacks of a colonial attitude of saving the natives from themselves. The South African policy development is not for sale. We have serious issues with the foreign or semi-foreign consultant who have no clue of our labor market and political dynamics, but have been allowed to lead government discussion on this very important matter. The parliamentarians should revisit this decision because they've passed a law that was not discussed at NEDLAC. We are ready to sit down with government as soon as they scrap this new law. Workers are called to put their differences and sectarian attitudes aside and unite behind the goal of pushing for this law to be scrapped. We are calling on all our unions and workers in general to start mobilizing for a rolling mass action. Workers unite because power is in your hands and hands off our retirement fund, in this case, our Provident Fund. This is a statement. We have also issued a COSATU fact sheet on Taxation Law Act, just to give a short background in terms of what has happened, where we're coming from in the history of this particular debate. And I think the leadership is ready to answer your questions.
Yeah, perhaps before they do that, Comrade General Secretary, I will give Comrade Mohale Ralebitso to speak on behalf of BBC.
Thank you, President. SG. We share in the concern about the process that was followed. I won't repeat what has already been said in terms of the backdrop, in terms of the Taylor Commission and the path that was agreed to by all parties to follow, a path that looks at the issues comprehensively and which therefore allows for packages of legislation to be issued which allow and avoid some of the challenges that we're facing now. And we want to support the leadership in urging workers not to resign and to trust that the process will eventually allow for an integrated approach and that we can find means by which to use NEDLAC, which is a forum at which all the social partners are meant to engage and understand the concerns of labor. It might seem an oddity for some that we are a business organization and on this particular issue or with labor, we shouldn't forget that business and labor and social partners are meant to work together to build a better country. Mm-hmm. There can be no benevolence in dictatorship, and therefore we want to urge that NEDLAC be brought into the equation and that the concerns that are being raised are considered. And for that matter, we've now seen, rather than a reduction in the number of people who are resigning to access their long-term saving to deal with indebtedness, an acceleration in that, which is a major concern. So as the Black Business Council, we want to urge that all parties, through NEDLAC in particular, come together and that labor's concerns are engaged, and we engage in those issues in a comprehensive manner. For the fact that parts of a social safety net have started to be built, and for which we applaud government, let's keep to the spirit of understanding how these issues impact workers who are the affected population. And in the same way that as business people we would not want to be dictated to, we want to urge that as the affected parties, labor be listened to. We respect the structures that are in place. We dare not undermine NEDLAC. Let's go to NEDLAC and engage in these issues. And that's the extent of our submission. Thank you, President.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Okay, we are going to take questions. We are going to take 5 this time. Please just tell us where you come from and who are you, and then you can ask the question from the panel. Okay? Have you looking hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's go.
Okay. Good afternoon, Alvin Sinclair from SABC TV News. Just one thing that I need clarity on from the statement is the phrase that they want to subsidize white people because white people live longer than black people. What's the assertion here? What message are you guys trying to convey here? And in the invitation to the media to come to this briefing, you mentioned that this is a law that President Jacob Zuma has signed into law. Have you guys been in consultation with the President or even the ANC for that matter?
Anton Meyer from Jacaranda FM. You say you are busy finalising your application for a Section 77 notice so that you can go on a full-day strike. When exactly do you plan on going on the strike, and will it be nationwide? For how long? Thank you.
It's Carganet from the Business Day. I think it's mostly covered the ANC side. I understand you guys are going to meet this week, but I believe at the Congress you said that you'd first meet with the ANC before giving the strike notice. And then just an issue of clarity, and again, I know you dealt with it extensively in the statement, but when you say this issue was not dealt with NEDLAC, are you talking specifically about the set of laws that went through the legislature, or are you talking about this law in conjunction with discussions on social security?
Okay, thank you. It's Govan from Eyewitness News. First question is also related to the ANC. So we've had the Secretary General come out publicly saying that he's in support of the pension reform and converting them all to the same system. How did that influence the meeting that you guys had on Monday? And second of all, you've mentioned here that it was only during the informal consultation between COSATU and the Treasury at which you discovered that they plan to sneak in the preservation amendment. So essentially, are you saying that this happened, COSATU did not expect this to happen, even though you knew that the tax amendment, administration amendment bill was being signed?
I'm Claudie Manovich from Netwerk 24. Mr. Dlamini, this is specifically for you. At your Congress, you issued quite a stern warning towards the ANC, telling them, if you touch workers' provident funds, if you touch their pension funds, we won't support you in the municipal elections. And at the ANC's birthday celebrations, of course, and that was before this law was now implemented, you did say COSATU will be supporting the ANC. What does this mean for your relationship with the ANC? In the statement that Caesar sent out just after it happened, he did say this will be a top priority thing at the CEC coming in February. Yes, I would just like to know, would you then put it towards the workers, or what will happen?
Thank you very much. I will pick but a few, starting with the first one. The last one. The last one, I mean. the last one. We said at the Congress, if government passes this law, which in its current form undermines the right of the workers to decide what they want to see or what they want to do about their savings, their salaries, we will definitely have a fight over this matter. And Congress mandated us to indeed engage on that fight. I don't want to be drawn back to now say, no, I did not say that we will not vote the ANC, because that's indeed not what I said. I didn't say we will not vote for the ANC if it passes this law at Congress. We want the ANC government or the government to ensure that this law, actually we're specific at Congress and we're appealing to the state president not to sign this law, to gazette this law into law until issues have been resolved. We have then further said the challenge we shall be facing is that when we go on a campaign for the ANC's election and workers are asking us about this matter and we're saying we have a Congress mandate that you must vote for the ANC, it will make our task to be difficult. The point. Let me go back to SABC, the first question. It is research that has indeed proven that how long you live is also based on the value for life, what your life span is. Do you have all the amenities? When you are sick, are you able to get the best treatment and be treated and be healed? Reality is that most of the black people are unable to access these facilities because they are poor, because they do not earn that much. But our white folks, not all of them, but the majority of them already has it in their hands, the ability to access all these amenities because they have enough money on their side. So they are able to take care of their lives even more better than the poor. Therefore, history will say now, and we have improved in South Africa, we now life expectancy is broadly at about 60. That's where it stands. But still, you will find those who are well-to-do still live even far longer, and it happens to be white. Let's put that one. I know people say it's a racist comment. It is not. It's a reality that because of the historical benefits that they've enjoyed and they still enjoy, they live longer than black people. The statement or the invite indeed says after the bill or the law has been signed by the state president. Now, an assumption would be then be saying now because the president has signed this one and therefore the fight is directed at the president of the republic. No, you will appreciate that when it comes to that level, it is after it would have followed a range of processes, including the processes of parliament and the NCOP having to then pass the law, which happened in this case late last year, and on the 24th of December, then the president signed this one, and on the 6th of January, it was then gazetted as the law in the Republic. So that's the end tail of it. The issue here is that our government has passed this law, which we say it doesn't meet our expectations as the workers. He has signed the law where we're saying NEDLAC has been undermined. We have put that clearly on record. There is no report Parliament is having right now from NEDLAC that these processes were exhausted at NEDLAC. There was no agreement. So it's how we're approaching the matter. If people want to use it for Zuma, it's for their own business to want to use it for Zuma. This challenge, we are challenging the government as a whole, as government of the Republic of South Africa. I will not deal with the second question on the Section 77. My leaders will deal with that. I'll end with this one. We met with the African National Congress on Monday, per the invitation of the ANC, and we entered into a discussion about this matter to particularly find what solutions can still be possible under the circumstances. And indeed, having discussed with the ANC, we agreed on a process going forward. There is a further meeting that will be happening. We hope when they come back from that meeting, they shall tell us what solutions they have in hand, and we'll measure that against what we are saying and we're calling our government to do, to repeal this law or to review this law, and ensure that there is a proper discussion about these issues. So there is no contradiction, therefore, between that and the COSATU program to challenge this matter when we're mobilizing our members to be ready for action, when we are mobilizing all workers in the country to be standing up and fight for this right which has been taken away from them. There is no contradiction with that of engaging with the ANC.
You know, I think the President have covered most of the questions that you wanted. I just want to go back to the issues of the life expectancy so that there is a proper understanding on these matters. Is that when you are in a retirement fund, especially in a pension fund, which is what the government is pushing us to, is that the monthly money you receive is paid to the member. When the member dies, it normally paid to the spouse. If the spouse dies at that age, it will have been paid to the children. But if the children are adults and they are not at school, the money is given back to the fund. And there are two beneficiaries in that one. The first one is that the state take what is called estate tax. So the first beneficiaries in the preservation when you died is the state on what is remaining to be your money. The second one is that the money is given back to the fund, and the money is shared among those who remains in the funds, those who will live longer. Members of the fund who will live longer. It's not whites in general, it's the white members in the fund. And the statistics by Stax that whites live longer than blacks in South Africa is a fact. So we're not debating that one. They benefit in terms of those, not of their own choice, but of course they benefit in terms, is the reality. If the money was in the Provident Fund, what would have happened if the member died? Of course there would have been a will or something is a state, it belongs to the workers. Members of the family will have that money. There's no doubt about it. Neither the state will benefit it, neither the fund managers will benefit it, neither either Provident Fund members will benefit it. It's the money that belongs to that member and his family alone. That's the point we're making up here. The second issue I want to address to your question is that we are going to NETLEC. That is our resolution because there is a law. We are not asking anybody whether to go to NETLEC. It's a directive from the Congress. So we are going in there to influence the negotiations. The NETLEC process is, its sole intention is to find a solution. It's not that you go to NETLEC because you want to go to a street. We want to find a solution, but if there's no solution found, we'll have to go to the street as part of the processes of influencing this thing. So your question as to when, for how long, that will be determined by the Central Executive Committee as we move along to the progress that we will be making. So there's no date, there's no duration in terms of what will happen and what kind of action we'll do. But it will be a sustained action because this is a battle that we don't want to lose. The member says this law is not only bad for them, but is also bad for the federation to come. Members and leaders here, they don't want a future generation to spit on their graves and say, where were you when this law was passed? That takes away what the forefathers of the 1973 has fought so hard to go to those issues. So we want to explain that particular process. In regard as to whether the government has been neglecting or not going to NETLEC in general, no. All other processes in many have been going to NETLEC, except this department, Treasury, got a tendency of not going to NETLAC. They did not go to NETLAC when they were promulgating the Tax Incentive Act. They did not go to NETLAC. And what they used there was the money bill, and they were arguing this is not a socio-economic issue. We disagree with them. We still disagree that it was a wrong approach. That's why our call is not only to the ministry, it's to the parliamentarians. They pass a NETLAC law that says all socio-economic issues must first be discussed in NETLAC before they consider it in Parliament. In this law, they did not do that one. They took the word of Treasurer that no, we went to NETLAC. They should have asked them, where is the NETLAC report that proves that we have gone to NETLAC? They did not do their work. That's why we are calling to them and says, you have not done your work. You let this slip. You trust Treasury because it's part of your their responsibility, by the way, is that they are above Treasury. Treasury and any other cabinet executive count to them. It is their responsibility. When somebody does not obey the law, it is their responsibility to reprimand them and say, you did not follow that particular. We know that Treasury said, no, we have consulted. Ask them, where is the NETLAC report? Just ask them, if you did consult in NETLAC as you claim, where is the NETLAC report that says so? And I think it will stop all this debate. We have met 20, 100 times and all those things. Where is the NETLAC report? The NETLAC report, in its first paragraph, indicate the issues and indicate how many meetings were held before it even goes to the conclusion as to what was the outcome. Finally, I just want to raise, before we go to the next issues, that we are fighting Treasury on these issues. But this is not supposed to be Treasury. The retirement and all those issues belong to the social development. It's supposed to be the social, the social department that's supposed to be leading this particular issue. We're asking them, where are they when we're fighting about these issues? Because the only way treasurers get involved is on the taxation. But these things does not belong to treasurer. It belongs to the social development ministry. And we're calling upon them that they must lead, they must fulfill their mandate, they must be able to engage with us.
Now, quickly, the emphasis that probably we should also be making, it is in the statement, but it is on our call to workers not to resign. Because what we have experienced, and with the negative impact that this law, before it was even passed as a law, during the drafting of the bill, was that workers began to panic and they resigned in numbers. And in that process of them resigning, they go back, they stay at home, they are unemployed. When they go back, because those vacancies still exist in the workplace, when they go back to find employment in the same workplace, they get employed under labor brokers. They get employed as casual workers. The benefits that they were having have all been taken away. Now we're saying employers begin to benefit as a result of a panic from workers wanting to resign and take all their money. Hence, we are making a call that we are calling on all workers not to panic, not to resign. Let us fight this law until it is reviewed or repealed, until all the processes that we have agreed to with the Treasury, during even our informal processes, that we will have road shows, there will be proper consultation so that workers begin to understand what is it that government wants to introduce in relation to their pension fund, but also allow them, with regards to their retirement, but also allow workers to also have a say, because we're saying this is a deferred wages of workers. It does not belong to government. It does not belong to Treasury. It is the workers that must make a decision about their deferred wages. it can't be a unilateral decision. And we're saying to workers, once you resign, you are taking away your power of making a decision about your own deferred wages. So we are really wanting to make that plea to all workers not to resign. Let us all get united behind this fighting of this law until government reviews the law or even repeals the law. Thank you. Just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, just on the Mantasha, the SG of the ANC's comment. Obviously, it would be amiss or strange to expect the ANC to say they distance themselves from what Treasury or what government is doing. It's an ANC government. It suffices that there would have been consultations or advices from the ANC before this matter was concluded in the manner that it has been. But now what has happened, we've met with the ANC and have highlighted to them that when they told you that there was agreement by the majority, including COSATU, it was a lie. When they say to the ANC, all parties were consulted and have agreed, that's not true. When they say that there were no objections by COSATU on this bill, that is not true. It is also not true, I must add, that in the meeting with the ANC, the matter is resolved. No, the matter is not resolved in the bilateral meeting we had with the ANC. It still remains unresolved. That's why we're still engaging even in this context. That's why we continue to engage. But what we can say to our ANC leaders, a lesson has got to be learned. Do not take reports from government people on a face value as if it is the truth all the time. Check, in particular on this one, which affects workers directly. You should have checked with COSATU whether COSATU was consulted and had agreed on the number of things. You should have checked with FEDUSA, you should have checked with NACTU and other labor unions whether they were consulted and had agreed on this. Therefore, and say, no, there was no problem. So I'm clarifying that area. In our meeting, we therefore have clarified to the African National Congress, which, by the way, there are serious problems as a result of this law, which is why we are calling for this change.
Thank you, President. We are going to take the last round. So anyone who wants to make it this round, and Robin. Yeah.
Thank you. Tia Nisila from Power FM. And you say that NEDLAC, this is the only issue that NEDLAC's been on demand on, but previously COSATU has objected to the way e-tolling was implemented and the youth rate subsidy. So I think the next big issue of discussion is the minimum wage, how those discussions are, how this will put that as an example. Perhaps the BBC can also talk to that. And then will you join forces with NIMSA around mobilizing, and especially since NACTU and FEDUSA have come out in support of these laws? And then at the time when the Nhlanhla was replaced and then Pravin Gordhan came in, there were suggestions that perhaps business is being listened to more by the ANC. Do you think that business has a hold on the ANC, and that's why these retirement reforms are going through? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. It's Govan again from Eyewitness News. Okay, mine is also related to the ANC. I hope you can tolerate it. I know it's a lot. How does the decision by the ANC government to implement this law and your decision to campaign against this law affect your planned campaigns to help the ANC secure the local government elections? I'm asking whether any of those plans have been disrupted as a result of you taking the decision to campaign against this law. And then I wasn't able to get an answer yesterday on whether or not you had allocated certain portions of money to help the ANC campaign in the elections. I wanted to find out whether that money would be redirected against this campaign. And then you say that you're taking the fight to the government as a whole. And then you went on to say, Mr. Dlamini, that it would be amiss to expect the ANC to disagree with what the government is doing because it's an ANC government. So are you only taking the fight to the government part of the ANC? Or can you just say that you're taking the fight to the ANC? And then and maybe I could get a comment from the Black Business Council in this regard. It's added to Tahila's comment where the perception is that the government listens to business more than it does to the trade unions, and specifically the government listens to big capital more than it does to smaller players in the business sector. What's your experience been in that regard? Does your opinion hold as much weight as that of, say, Bobby Godsell in those meetings?
Alvin again from the SABC. Just to the Black Business Council, do you guys have any idea of how many workers have resigned since this law came into law? Something like that. And can COSATU also comment on that as well? Do you have any ideas from the affiliates? What are their take on what has been happening, and have they given you any numbers of how many people have resigned so far?
Thank you from City Press. I just want clarity on the meeting with Treasury, the meeting where you claim Treasury had basically misled and sneaked through this policy. So when was that meeting exactly? And the other one would be about what would happen then if you fail to convince government to reverse this law. And the other one is about NEDLAC. Exactly at what process were discussions before this law before this law was signed into law? Because you're saying that you were never consulted, right? So exactly at what point were the discussions at NEDLAC?
Okay, I think some of it has been covered by my colleagues, my guidance from SABC. And maybe to re-emphasize, at what point do you draw the line? I mean, in the past probably 5 years, you've lost all of your major battles against the ANC government, e-tolls, youth wage subsidy, labor brokers, and now we are talking another big issue which has to do with workers' pensions. And my second issue, maybe as a right to respond, NUMSA basically saying that they are vindicated when they said in 2013 that you must cut ways with the tripartite alliance, and this is just one more example of how you're continuously disappointed and having to fight back.
Okay, President.
Okay, let me try. And I'll start with the Power FM. And pick two only. Are we going to join forces with NUMSA? We're saying in our statement, workers must unite to fight this issue. Whether they will be fighting there at NUMSA, it's another matter. We are calling for workers to unite and fight this battle. It sees no color, it sees no class amongst workers. It's affecting all the workers in the country. The sooner they stand together and fight this matter, the better. Of course, there shall be no joint programs with NUMSA. We're not even talking about any joint programs. We are focused on mobilizing all workers in the country to unite to fight this battle. The question around what is happening at the negotiations which are current around the national minimum wage, we are still negotiating there. We hope we shall be able to find each other there. We are worried at times when there are disagreements, but we are managing those disagreements. We are continuing to negotiate to find a common ground, because we all believe, cutting across business, labor, and government and community, we say South Africa needs a national minimum wage. We agreed on that one. As to at what level, that's where the discussions are at the moment. Gavin, you probably chose not to listen when I was giving a response to my sister there. I will anyway repeat. There is a COSATU resolution amongst many COSATU resolutions for us to mobilize for the victory of the African National Congress, even in these coming local government elections. And we are beholden by that resolution, and we shall work and ensure that we do our task. We are faced with this matter right now, where government has passed a law that affects our right to our retirement money. That is the issue that is confronting us, and we're fighting that law. The General Secretary here says we want to win that battle. That is our intention, and our focus is that we must win this battle. It may take us longer than we have planned. We shall continue to fight for winning this battle, and I know we shall win this battle. And that is where our emphasis is. We are fighting to win this battle for the protection of the right of the workers to their money, their hard-earned salaries or savings. The fight, is this the fight with the government or with the ANC? Where do we draw the line? We are calling for our government to repeal this law. And if that does not happen, we shall continue to engage in the streets. We shall engage in the platforms that we have to fight, probably in any way, to win this battle. We must win this fight. Put the ANC or put whoever as a political party and say now is the, if they do this thing, we'll be fighting to win this battle. It is our money, and nothing deters us from fighting that particular battle. Let me stop here on this one, and specifics would come. You will know, Matlasi, that last year alone, and you're talking about the public service, it's on record that as a result of this panic about this law, more than 86,000 public servants resigned. Whether it was out of a perception that government was nationalizing, or whether it was a cover for people to access their money because they are struggling, they are indebted, it's another matter. The reality is that because government opened a loophole, in particular not to educate people about this law, people resigned. Last week alone, already we're picking up, we don't have the full figures in our fingertips, when Treasury issued a circular, because there is a circular that is out now issued by Treasury, saying people must not resign because this law is very, very good for the workers. Again, these resignations have picked up again. We are collecting figures from the ground to see what is it telling us. But again, it is because of the panic that has come out because of this particular matter. Mrs. Bridget will want to come.
I think we need to look at it from a holistic point of view.
You probably come this side.
Yeah.
First of all, here, as part of Black Business Council, I'm also the president of the South African Mining Development Association, which represents the Junior Mining Chamber. This chamber consists of workers, National Union of Mine Workers. And the last thing the problem we're having is the historically disadvantaged South Africans that have just engaged into business, especially the new investors in business. I personally have been for 28 years in the mining industry. But then since the new South Africa, many historically disadvantaged South Africans have just become participants in the industry of mining. And what does that mean? You inherit a South Africa Pty Limited of people that have no bonds, that were never during the past allowed to even own land or own collateral. These are the people that have always relied on the Provident Fund, and that Provident Fund's access to that money to allow them, to give them that access to invest in their businesses. So this is not just a workers' problem. It is also a problem of those historically disadvantaged business owners who are also workers in their companies, but who are also owners that want to unlock their debt, because there is no bank today that wants to give you a loan without a balance sheet. There's no bank that wants to give you a loan without a cash flow. There's no bank that's going to give you a loan without collateral. And the only collateral we black people have ever had is the collateral of the Provident Fund. Now, if that is taken away from us, what next are we going to do to sustain our businesses? What next are we going to do to sustain the fact that we are creating employment and contributing towards the employment creation of the majority of South Africans? But to go beyond that, we also have another problem. We cannot afford to lose workers, nor can we afford to have our workers resign. That is now a crisis waiting to explode. And we're appealing to government that please consult. It is important that the consultation process embodies everybody, so that in the end, when decisions are made, they're made for all stakeholders. And I'm sitting here also wondering that if this continues and we have a situation where government and the majority of the stakeholders are not able to sit around the table, as COSATU has demonstrated to us, because yesterday COSATU briefed us fully in the Black Business Council offices, and it's for that reason that we are here to say it's not just a COSATU problem. It is a problem that embodies all South Africans, and we're pleading to all South Africans, all political parties, all unions, to stand together and unite and assist our government in addressing this unitedly in the forum that has been recommended, the forum called NEDLAC. Yeah. And we also appeal to government that please attend your meetings. You know, we also, from our organization, have similar problems, where you find that there are stakeholders in government, stakeholders that do not consult, and stakeholders that are not listening to the people, or stakeholders that would want, not stakeholders, individuals, officials in government that want to push through documents without consulting people. And very soon you'll hear another issue coming on to fray that we are simultaneously talking with COSATU about, that I don't want to discuss now, but at the next press conference, because we don't want to take the focus of this one, but we will have another press conference that we will discuss another consultation process that did not embody all the participants and all the stakeholders in South Africa, and that is the problem. Thank you very much. And Adil from the Black Manufacturers Association.
Mention has been made of, and this speaks to the issue of whether or not there's a bias on government's part towards big business. I'll leave you to form your own conclusions as far as that's concerned. But suffice to say, as Sis Bridget has spoken to, next week we are again going to, with COSATU, be engaging on a particularly important matter, wherein, at least in that particular instance, there is bias. We're not accusing government and we partner government in a number of instances to address issues relating to the transformation of the South African business landscape. So we're not going to distract from the issue at hand of saying workers are disaffected by a piece of legislation which hasn't followed a process that speaks to the socio-economic issues which are undeniably in play and therefore ought to be discussed at NEDLAC, because they'll have the unintended consequences of disrupting the economy. And all of us should be clear right now that any disruption, whether well-intentioned or not, isn't going to help the South African economy. So let's not create things unnecessarily which can be avoided, which result in disruptions when we already have so much work to do to re-establish parts of our economy which are still hurting and which impinge upon our ability to create employment and the kinds of employment which will in fact allow us to move up the manufacturing value chain, which will allow that workers earn better so that the potential for saving can be realized, and therefore inside of that we can have a healthier approach to the issue of preservation. Because we would have to agree, I think, that if you look at the reasons that workers are resigning prematurely from employment, those issues are not going to be solved by this piece of legislation. So if we thought we were addressing them, they are not going to be addressed with this mechanism. Let's go back to NEDLAC. Let's go back to a comprehensive approach that allows us to engage the root cause that the government sought to address correctly so in the first place, which is that in the main people do not preserve. By the way, this is not only limited to blue-collar workers also have this issue because the level of indebtedness in the country is too high. Let's engage that issue and say what are the drivers and be systematic in our approach. And let's not, in our engagement today, distract from that and invite the likes of the Black Business Council, for example, to the issue of bias and what have you, we can deal with another time. But suffice to say, on this particular issue, we are united in saying we need, we've noted the intentions. This is not going to be the solution. Let's go to NEDLAC, have a discussion. Let's not see us disrupting the economy any further and taking out workers who, by the way, are more experienced than whomever is going to be replaced with, which is going to impact on productivity. So let's not disrupt the economy unnecessarily, and that's why we're particularly interested as the Black Business Council to say, we can do better, let's go and do better.
Yeah, can I, in conclusion? I think.
Thank you so much. Maybe just to bring about clarity on some of the issues and the questions actually brought about. We are from business, particularly black business, in support of the call which was made by COSATU to say that the issue of pension funds, which is critical. As you know, pension funds do not only affect public workers, it affects the general economy. We are in an economic situation globally where there is turmoil. The minute we send yet another panic into the economy and saying that workers must now either exit out of their pension funds in order to actually experience their benefits, or there will be a law that will penalize them for not having withdrawn, it's not something that we want to get out there into the market. So the key points here today, generally business, black business particularly, is extremely concerned. We are from the manufacturers in black business. One worker lost in government is an opportunity lost in business and in industry. And furthermore, it impacts upon our goals to industrialize, reindustrialize, revitalize the economy of South Africa. The issues are not just about a pension fund and a pension fund-related issue. It is related to ordinary South Africans, and particularly the ordinary people. You have a person who resigns on the hope that they will cash in with a lump sum for that period of time, with the hope that they will go back to work. The chances are they might not be reemployed. Are we creating an environment by which there will be unemployment, there will be a perpetuation of an economy that is continuously dependent on people who will be more and more unemployed? So there are vast issues, and that is why this is a coalition of various sectors, various industries, and particularly COSATU leading it with the call to say we want workers not to resign. We do not want to create an economic panic within the South African economy and market. The law must be scrapped. This is our call, and we support COSATU's call on this. We will be mobilizing as business. We will be mobilizing with the youth. We will be mobilizing with communities to ensure that this does happen. This law must be scrapped because the rights of pensions belong to the pension that the workers have actually accumulated on their own right. Does not belong to the state to administer or look after. The other issue in terms of pension fund, we're looking at a coalition of black business and labor. Not only restricted or restrained to black business. Business is business in general. We depend on these workers to support our businesses to go forward and going forward. The other issue that we would really emphasize upon is that I think it's about time government understands that governance is about engaging the whole of society. They should take all of us along. We've got structures, we've got associations, we've got unions, we've got congresses, we've got federations, and we've got the society in general. We need to start talking in one voice. You will be shocked that the members sitting here are members of the movement, which is the ANC, and other particular structures included. We're not talking in diverse voices. All we are saying is we're bringing back the issues that are of core and concern to South Africans. And we are saying that NEDLAC has been a process which has been recommended. There are other issues with regards to what we still need to engage upon. If government needs to start using preservation and as well as creating a savings culture and process in our economy, we should look at other things. There are government issues that government has not addressed certain issues. We've got challenges such as transfer pricing. If we were to unlock value that is sitting around the issue of transfer pricing, we could rebuild part of our economy. We've got issues relating to minimum wage, which you can do that. You've got the issues of youth employment, which within that environment you can create that particular opportunities. We've fought against all of these issues, the e-tolls and all of that. And as you know, these are ongoing battles and challenges, but it is part of our evolving democracy. We are understanding how to govern and how to govern ourselves. So in conclusion, we are united and we call upon the South Africans to mobilize against the scrapping and the complete removal and review of this law. It cannot be implemented in its entirety as it is, and we cannot encourage the workers to go back and now lose their jobs in order to realize simple minimum savings that they've already worked for. So workers must unite, the economy must unite, the South Africans must stand together and ensure that we do not yet create yet another economic panic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, President.
Just in conclusion, I mean, we are trying to put the fact sheet so that members of the media can be able on their own time to read some of these issues. There were meetings in NEDLAC, 2 of them to be specific, before this act. Remember, there were 2 stages of this act. There was a time when it was supposed to be implemented. We engaged, we agreed with government that it can't be implemented in 2015 because we need to engage. We agreed that the basis of the engagement must be the tabling of the comprehensive social security. There's an agreement. When they come back this time, we said they try to come back. We said, where is the comprehensive social security? Then they move away from NEDLAC. They went to the different stakeholders, to NACTU, to FEDUSA, and on and all that one. So we could not agree to continue without the comprehensive social security. On that basis, the Treasury ran away from NEDLAC. That's why we said there's no NEDLAC report. The NEDLAC report will say the matter has not been concluded. Treasury ran away from NEDLAC. The second issue we want to raise in our conclusion is that workers, as long as there's a capitalist system, there will be problem because it's based on the exploitation. And when there's a capitalist system in place, it many times will be supported by the government of the day. So we are going to raise and fight those particular issues. And when workers decide to call it off, we'll follow their mandate in terms of those issues. But if they continue to say, on this matter, we must continue fighting, we are going to fight. People said we were defeated on the labor brokers. We said the battle continues. That's what our Congress says. We wanted to be banned. Government came with 6 months. We fought to 3 months. We are going to take the battle forward now to the total ban on this particular issue. So for me, that might be an event. To us, it is not. It's a process, and the process must continue in terms of those issues. There's one question I think that the media must engage with Treasury in these particular issues. Why Treasury chose not to call public hearings? You must ask them. Government on the national minimum wage, they call public hearing. On the labor brokers, they call public hearing. Why on this one? Why on where did they get the mandate if they can't call the public hearing and hear workers' says on this particular issue? This is not how democracy works. If they doubt, if they may have just a doubt that no, COSATU leaders are power craze and all those issues, the challenge I think that must be put to them. Call public hearing and hear what workers says in terms of these particular issues. We listen to our members. They say they don't want this law. Let's listen to them. If people, 86,000 can resign on rumors, which was that case, if people are starting resigning now before the law is being even effective, because it's coming to effect on the 31st of March, does not that itself cause a crisis? When a crisis because of this law, it must be amended or repealed accordingly as soon as possible. On the issues of voting, let me just say these things, maybe for the last time, Comrade President. We are going to a local government elections. People choosing their best candidate to help them in terms of their service delivery. The question that we are raising almost indicate that workers who are members of COSATU, who live in their areas, when other people choose their councillors, they should be saying, no, we're not going to choose the councillors. The councillors in the first instances must be chosen. Those who are standing for election must be decided by those people who lives in that particular ward, including COSATU members. When the councillors of their choice is being put to stand for election, we can't say to COSATU, nominate somebody to be elected, but don't elect that particular issue. The point we are making, and I think the point the President is making, is that it's going to be difficult to say we must do this work in the manner we want to do when there are issues that need to be resolved. And we think we're going to resolve this issue. We're so confident that the government will listen to this issue. They have to find a way of raising this issue. This issue is not insurmountable. It's easier to resolve. Listen to the people in terms of how we need to move forward. We think government has to sit back and be able to listen to the concerns that we are raising on behalf of our members. Government has no business in deciding how workers must use their deferred wages. Of course, we know the benefit that government hope that if workers preserve, they will not carry their responsibilities when those people are supposed to be adding an old age pension fund. We understand that. We understand fully. But you can't force when workers are unable to serve. That's the only saving that they have, by the way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, General Secretary. Now we have reached the end of this process. We really appreciate members of the media for coming. For any one-on-one interviews, you are welcome to the Thank you. Thank you very much.